Want to dine and dash? Take your wallet when you leave. I work as a waitress at a high-end restaurant and we get many customers. Last week I just so happened to get sat with a large group of 20 people. I immediately knew this table was only going to cause trouble. They were extremely rowdy and many of the other guests complained about them. When asked to be mindful of the other people in the restaurant, they were rude and didn't settle down. They ordered expensive dishes, top-shelf drinks, and ordered me around like an animal. In the end, the group had racked up quite the bill. Big groups like this rarely ever tip well, which was my main concern of the evening. I knew I was losing my dignity for at least $4 on a large bill. When I presented them with a check, everyone got really quiet. It was the first time of the whole evening that this group wasn't causing a commotion, so I knew something was wrong. I noticed that no one reached for their wallet. I asked them what was wrong and one of them said they needed time to decide how they were going to pay. I left the check on the table and went to assist my other tables. I had to keep going back and forth to the kitchen, so I ended up forgetting about the big group. It wasn't until my coworker pointed out that the restaurant was finally quiet, so the group must have left. I went to check on the table and they were gone. I picked up the check and it was empty. No money, no card, no nothing. They just dined and dashed. After all that ruckus and commotion, I was the one left to pay. I almost cried on the spot knowing I had to take care of this bill now. I went to tell my manager what happened and I did get reprimanded. But he also checked our cameras to see if it caught their faces so we could report them to the police. Unfortunately, our camera sucked and everything was blurry. All we could see was them leaving one by one and very discreetly. That's probably why I wasn't able to catch them or even notice. It was clear this wasn't the first time they had dined and dashed. My manager told me I had to cover their very expensive meal and I just sulked while I had to clean their table. During the cleanup, I found a wallet on one of the seats. I had a choice to make. Either pay for the meal myself or make this person pay all of it. I slept soundly that night knowing I wasn't out of $1,000. What's your worst intimate experience? I was but a young freshman in college, and upon finding out the girl I had lost my V card to 6 months prior was cheating on me, I did some silly things. After about a week of drinking with a roommate and trying to get out of the funk, I met a girl 2 floors down, recently dumped, also drinking alone, and we just clicked. Looking back it was obviously the alcohol, but I thought she was great. We keep drinking together, and at some point my roommate goes to bed, so we head down to her room. Very drunk at this point, although she was much more than I. She starts to make out with me. I notice there is much more to tongue and saliva than I'm used to. I forge ahead, excited. She suggests we get in bed, I agree, happily. Then I notice she has a lofted bed. The kind where you put a couch or desk underneath, and then sleep on the top bunk. So we get up there, and there is not much room. Maybe 1.5 feet to the ceiling. So we get naked, and handsy. She is very drunk. Then she says she wants to give me gawk. I agree, although I had reservations, I had never done it before. She, with not a little difficulty, flips around and mounts me. Not 2 minutes in, her head stops moving. I stop and listen, and she's snoring in the strangest way. Almost like she had something in her mouth and had fallen asleep on it. So I tap her shoulder, say her name. Nothing. Then I lift her head off of my rapidly shrinking PP, being careful of the ceiling. Then, I attempt to remove myself from beneath her sleeping loins. Now, here's the thing. I wasn't a small guy, I worked out and such. Not huge but not tiny. And she was average size, but a runner. She had very large legs. So when I went to lift her, she hit the ceiling. And I couldn't get enough clearance to get out from under her. I ended up sleeping until she woke up, which was 9 hours later. What did the weird kid in your school do? There was a kid named Josh. There were a lot of bullies at that school, and since Josh was a ginger, sometimes he got singled out. But instead of withdrawing and hiding like I did, he did crazy stuff. He would fold his upper lip down so his front row of teeth stuck out, then bug out his eyes and speak in a high chipmunk voice. He once chased me around the room with a pair of scissors trying to cut my hair. He was obsessed with Itchy and Scratchy and would quote them all the time. He wrote "shut up" on his eyelids with a pen and blinked at all the teachers. When we dissected a frog, our teacher made the mistake of telling us that the eyes would bounce. Everyone looked immediately at Josh, who grinned, bounced an eye off the table. He then ate it. But his most infamous trick was bear bear kill kill. I don't know where the phrase came from, but it was one of those things he said whenever he wasn't getting enough attention, and it meant something crazy was about to happen. One day, probably the scissor chase day, we were winding down for the end of the day. Josh had been oddly quiet, so we hadn't really been paying any attention to him. Then one of the kids screamed, and we turned around to see blood dripping off his arm. He had taken a pair of blunt school scissors and had painstakingly carved bear bear kill kill into his forearm without any of us noticing. I don't remember what the teacher did, which also disturbs me as this incident should have set off a flurry of activity. After that, the incident was never mentioned again. Josh showed up with a bandage the next day, and things continued. After that year, I was moved to a different school for unrelated reasons, and I never saw Josh again. A year later, I heard that he had moved to Kentucky to live with his much older brother. His mom had died when he was born, so it was just his dad taking care of him. His dad was a doctor and worked all the time, so Josh rarely saw him. One day, his dad didn't show up or call into work. No one could get him on the phone. His office called the police, and when they arrived, they found Josh still asleep. In their infinite wisdom, they decided to make Josh go into his dad's bedroom to check on him. Josh walked in to discover his father in bed, dead of a surprise heart attack. I remember we all talked about Josh in hushed tones like he was some kind of legend. It wasn't until I was older that I started to wonder whether his craziness was just his way of dealing with a chaotic and lonely life. Update: the time I messed up by being willing to do anything to help my girlfriend end things. My girlfriend and I decided to end our relationship. This happened on Sunday. The plan was to unpack the hoodie situation, the deceased ex-boyfriend, my girlfriend struggling to end, her feelings towards me, my feelings towards her, our feelings towards getting therapy, etc. However, when I showed up at the flat to have that discussion, my girlfriend was no longer sober. I could see it in her eyes, hear it in her voice, smell it on her breath. She was drunk. It was out of character. My girlfriend usually avoids drinking too much. I asked if she was in the mood to talk about what happened with the hoodie. My GF said she never wanted to use the hoodie to hurt my feelings, but she got sick of hearing me talk about getting her off like it's become my life's work. I apologized for becoming obsessed with her and promised to tone it down. My girlfriend didn't seem to believe my promise and asked if I would ever enjoy sleeping with her if she never had an end. I was honest and said with or without an end intimacy would always be enjoyable with her because I loved her, but deep down I would probably feel like she's not getting the full experience if there was no satisfying payoff for her at the end. My girlfriend said if I wanted a satisfying payoff, all I had to do was wear the hoodie again and again and again. I asked if that was really her talking or the alcohol. My girlfriend shrugged. I asked if she thought it was normal to ask her boyfriend to wear something that belonged to her dead boyfriend, especially during intimacy. My GF struggled to stop the tears and said the hoodie actually belonged to the guy who was best friends with her dead boyfriend. She confessed to cheating on him before he passed away. I was speechless. My GF clarified that the hoodie belonged to someone who was still alive. She taunted me to ask her why she had the hoodie of the guy who never loved her, why the hoodie made her go wild when I had it on, why she cheated on the guy she loved more than anyone, etc. I hugged her out of the blue until she managed to calm down. The two of us eventually ended up on the couch. We were too emotionally exhausted to continue talking. She fell asleep. When she woke up, she asked me to leave. For good. She said our relationship kind of tested her to see if she really was ready for another relationship since the death of her boyfriend. What happened with the hoodie made her realize something she apparently knew for a long time now. She was not ready for me, for us, for anyone. I did my best to fight for our relationship, but her mind was made up. She was done. We were done. I've been unable to sleep, hence me typing this post while most people on my side of the planet are sleeping or almost getting up for work. I hope my ex-girlfriend will be okay. Man, I hope I'll be okay. The spider in my bathroom died today. He's been there since about the middle of October. When I first noticed him, the inclination was to squash, but the little guy could really run when he needed to, so I decided to form a truce. It was pretty obvious that he wasn't too interested in humans, so as long as he stayed where he was, I'd leave him. It was getting cold outside and I felt bad about sending him out to die. So that was that. Hubby went after him a few more times but eventually gave up. He became a rent-paying household member, catching the gnats that flew down into his dark little corner. I began talking to him, saying hi, things like that. He never ran when it was just us. He trusted me. He would even wave back a time or two. This morning I went to take a shower to get at the dead skin attacking my feet, and a bottle of body wash fell over the side of the tub into his web. I don't know what he was doing down there. He'd been spending a lot of time close to the ground lately. But I hate myself. I hate that I took a shower this morning. I hate that I didn't just stay in bed with my itchy feet. I hate that I got attached to a stupid spider and now I'm crying so hard I can't breathe. That little spider taught me a powerful lesson about fear and friendship and I'll never forget it. People who slept with a coworker, what happened after? Back when I was in college and had recently been hired by a company and was enjoying my new position. Of some note to the story is that I was hired by the general manager as the human resources manager was on stress leave. Fast forward a few months and I hit my end of probation, which meant I got a small raise, to celebrate having a bit more spare cash. But really, who needed a reason at that age? Some friends from school and I decided to go out for drinks. We ended up meeting some friendly women and getting to know them over a few drinks. One thing led to another and I ended up going home with one. She was a lovely woman of 3 or 4 years older than me. We did the deed and said our goodbyes. Come Monday I head into work, still feeling good about the weekend. About an hour in, my boss comes to tell me that the HR manager is back and wants to do meet and greets with everyone that was hired in her absence. I'm penned in for just after lunch. I head into HR a tad early and lo and behold my boss and another employee are chatting with the woman from the other night. We make eye contact and she looks shocked and asks me what I'm doing there. I explain that I work here and I'm here for my meet and greet, and ask what she is doing here. She says she is the HR manager and my jaw drops a bit. My boss makes a joke about us staring at each other and leaves. We end up having a nice chat and getting to know each other a bit better. Neither of us bring up our past activities. Fast forward about 2 weeks and I'm suddenly called in the office by HR. I'm promptly informed by her that there is a strict no romantic relationships amongst employees policy in place and they had been informed that I had broken this rule. 5 minutes later I'm being escorted from the building. It was a hard few months trying to balance finding work and going to school. I spent almost all of my savings on rent and ended up leaving town to move in with some family until I was back on my feet. It was not a fun time in my life.
My mother decided to get married the weekend before me. My mother decided to get married the weekend before me. I, 26F, and my fiancé, 26 meters, are getting married in 2 weeks. We have been engaged with our date set for over a year. My mom was the first person we called when we got engaged and all she said was, "I'm sure I'm the last to know. You're probably sick of hearing congratulations by now. She flew out a couple months later for our engagement party. I was outside with my friend when she stormed outside, past everyone else sobbing and wouldn't speak to me, except to yell at me to go back inside. Later she told me she was just overwhelmed. Then she met her boyfriend. She told me he makes her feel so loved like my fiancé does for me. But that she was also still seeing a few other people, mostly because her new boyfriend doesn't speak any English and my mom doesn't speak Spanish. They communicate through Google Translate. A few months later, my fiancé and I are in my hometown for a childhood friend's wedding. My mother was also invited and brought her boyfriend. I was in the wedding, so my fiancé was stuck next to them for the ceremony. He said they made out the whole time, and whenever they weren't, my mom was complaining. During the reception, if they weren't on the dance floor grinding on each other, they were back at their table making out. He even had his hand up her dress on several occasions. I brought up this behavior on the drive home and she said he's Latin, he's just very passionate. While we were in town, my Mo decided to throw us a wedding shower. I even made sure the bride whose wedding I was in was okay with it first. But it was a great chance for my fiancé to meet all of me friends, people I haven't seen since before the pandemic the last time I was there. My Mo tried to include my mom in the planning. Mom said she would bring table decorations and tablecloths. She brought them and then immediately sat down and got on her phone. Didn't bother to even get the things out of the car. I asked her to frost cupcakes if she was just going to sit there while I set up tables. She agreed but complained about it the whole time. Once my friends started showing up, she completely ignored everyone and just sat in the corner on her phone. My fiancé went out of his way to try and include her in every conversation. She knew a lot of people there, girls I've been friends with since first grade, people I went to high school with, my Mo's parents, and she just ignored everyone. Then complained to my fiancé that I wasn't spending time with her. Even though I had set the day before of our trip aside to specifically spend with her and my younger siblings. After we got back from our trip, I found out I was pregnant. Again, she was the first one I called because I knew she would be upset if she wasn't. I called her several times and she didn't answer, so I called my dad and best friend and told them. When I finally got a hold of her, she said, "Wow. Congrats." In the most monotone voice I've ever heard her use in my whole life. At the end of last month, her and my dad both told me they didn't know if they could afford to come to my wedding. Again, the date has been known for over a year. I don't understand why they didn't work out travel and lodgings in advance, not to mention my mother just moved recently to be closer to her boyfriend's job. I was honestly over all of her behavior at this point, so I figured it would be a good thing if she didn't show and I was at peace with it. But she worked it out and called me this past week to tell me she got the plane tickets for her, my brother and her boyfriend. Oh, and by the way, that they were getting married in a week. A week before my own wedding. My fiancé and I both cannot wrap our heads around how she could possibly think this is acceptable. She knows how much we've been looking forward to this, and it just feels like I'm not allowed to have anything for myself. She always needs a slice of whatever I get. Now she's going to come to our wedding and tell everyone that she just got married too. I have to warn our photographers not to speak to her because I know she'll tell them she just got married and was wondering if they could take a few pictures of them together. She's going to try to make our wedding her wedding, without having to pay for any of it. It feels like she's jealous and just wishes to be me. I don't know if it's the pregnancy hormones or if it's past trauma to do with her. We have a long history of not getting along. I thought we had been doing well in recent years, until I met my fiancé, but I literally never want to speak to her again after this wedding. I'll definitely be going no contact for at least a little while. I don't know if anyone will even read this novel, but I desperately needed to get it off my chest. My entitled roommate had put some curfew on me. Now, she called our resident advisor because I returned home at 8 a.m. I'm a freshman in college living in a dorm and got a randomly assigned roommate. We live very different lifestyles. I like to stay up late and sleep in late, and she likes to go to bed early and wake up early. At the beginning of the year, she told me she likes to go to bed early and is a light sleeper, and I told her I like to stay up late, and we came to the agreement that she could turn out the light at any point and I would be quiet after that. She goes to bed 9-11-ish, and I often get ready for bed and lay in bed at these times out of respect. However, there are generally 2 to 3 nights a week, one of which is a weekday, that I stay up and out past this time. I keep the light off and do nothing more than crawl into bed when I return home, 12:03-ish. About 3 weeks ago, my roommate told me she doesn't like me staying out late because it affects her sleep and that she wants me back by 12. My friends have made fun of me since, because out of respect for her, I have, except for a few exceptions, left parties, study sessions, and hangouts early to get home on time. On Monday night, I was out playing board games with friends and lost track of time. I noticed it was 12:30 and out of respect for her I decided to pull an all-nighter with my friends in the common room. I returned that morning at 8:15 to get ready and shower because I had a meeting at 9. However, I got an angry text later that day calling me out for returning at 8:15, despite me doing my best to remain quiet and even not returning home at an unreasonable hour, as I would have been up at that time anyways. I responded and apologized for waking her up, but explained that I stayed out all night for her and I did nothing wrong. I also explained that while I was willing to compromise and be back most nights at midnight, as long as I was courteous there would be nights I would come back later. I got a message last night that she had scheduled a meeting with our resident advisor to mediate, and I honestly want to know if I'm in the wrong. Update: I met with my roommate and RA today. He told her that she couldn't set a time for me to return, but had us set specific expectations for when I return home late, like no opening and closing drawers, turning on lights, and closing the door gently, things I was already doing but will be extra mindful of in the future. I told her that I appreciated her as a roommate and felt bad about how my different lifestyle affected her and would be mindful of coming back in, but like the RA said I would be coming back on my timeline.
Doctors and nurses of Reddit, what have been your why didn't you come in sooner moments? I had a patient come in saying he couldn't see. How long had it been going on? For 5 days. The man had been blind for 5 days and didn't come in because he thought it might be like a cold or something. During the exam when I asked him to move his legs he said, "Oh, I can't do that?" I asked how long he'd been unable to move his legs or walk. Wife chimes in about 2 years. Never saw a doctor about it, they just borrowed a friend's wheelchair and kept it rolling. Turned out he'd had multiple strokes with multiple risk factors he never addressed. Given how little insight he appeared to have into the condition I honestly felt sorry he didn't have insurance, so I'm sure that played a role in him avoiding seeing. Found out my husband made a BET with his friends that he could sleep with me. I'm 25 now, and I found out something about my husband, Mark, that shook me to my core. He's been friends with my stepbrother, Max, since their college days. They've always been friendly to me, and I never suspected they could do something so awful to me, especially since they always acted like they respected me. Their old group of friends recently decided to have a get-together, and it ended up being held at our place. During dinner, one of Mark's friends started making sly comments about how Mark was lucky that things worked out between us. At that moment, my husband and Max got noticeably uncomfortable, and I knew something was up. I pressed for answers. Eventually, one of Mark's friends spilled the ugly truth. When Max had introduced Mark to me 6 years ago, Mark had described me as arrogant and a loser, and he'd bet with his buddies about who could teach me a lesson by sleeping with me first. I admit, back then, I was pretty arrogant and annoying, thinking I was smarter than everyone else. But the fact that they had bet on me, and that Mark was part of it, hurt like nothing else. I would have understood better if Mark had always been a jerk. I'd have thought it was my fault for falling for him. But he'd been sweet and caring since we started dating, and I never suspected he was making fun of me behind my back. When his friend spilled the beans, I just put on a brave face, laughed it off, and left the room. Mark followed, pleading with me, saying he'd changed, and he loved me. We talked for hours, and he apologized sincerely. I wanted to forgive him, but I couldn't shake the disgust and hurt I felt. The next morning, we went to a doctor's appointment because I'm pregnant. When I saw him cry tears of joy at the sight of our baby, it disgusted me. I couldn't tell if he was being genuine or not. I want to trust him again, but it feels impossible. I'm torn. Can things ever go back to the way they were before I found out about this terrible bet? I just don't know if I can ever truly forgive him and see him the same way again.
I am leaving my fiancé of 8 years. My husband and I have known each other since we were 13. We were best friends for years and we both dated during these times of being friends. I had girlfriends and she had boyfriends, but we were always close. Honesty, I think a lot of prior relationships failed because our partners couldn't handle the fact that our best friend was of the opposite gender. Anyway, after years of being best friends we got intoxicated one evening while being home for college and slept together. It was the best intimacy I have ever had, and she says the same. After that we joked about being friends with benefits. We did for a couple of months but our emotions started to really grow for each other, and we both admitted to always having a crush on each other. Everyone said we did anyway. So we started dating. We had what many would consider the perfect relationship. No real issues and our arguments were few and far between, not to mention usually petty. A year ago I proposed and she said yes and we planned our wedding for the fall. So here we are. Anyway, we had our bachelor/bachelorette parties about a month ago and we told each other what we were going to do. Me and my buddies were going to the amusement park, not going to say which one, during the day. Then go out drinking and riding four-wheelers and gators on trails. We only had a couple to be safe, we were by no means intoxicated. Then after that was done for the evening we were going to go back to my place and barbecue, play board/card games and video games and get smashed. My soon-to-be ex-fiancé plan was to go to the spa in the morning, go to the winery for the day and then go back to their hotel for the evening and order in room service and play games, what I don't know. We both insisted on no dancers. I for one do not really care as I am a confident man and am confident in my package. My soon-to-be ex however, didn't want me seeing other women naked. I said I had no issue with that as strip clubs/dancers aren't really my thing and same for her. I have nothing against people in the field, just not for me. Anyway, our nights go without any problems and then she comes about a day later. Everything seemed normal and we have continued to finish up the wedding. We are getting married in October, so it is coming up. Well, anyway, over the weekend, it took me some time to process. My buddy called me and asked me to come over to help him with something. No problem. Anyway, I got there and we worked on a little project he needed help on, which only took about an hour. I said to my buddy, I think you could have done that on your own, dude, as a joke. He says, yeah, but this isn't really the reason I had you come over. I asked him, then what am I here for? He takes me into his home where his wife, a good friend of my soon-to-be ex, is sitting at the table crying. I asked, dude, is she okay? He said, yeah, but she has something to tell you. His wife just says, I am so sorry. She goes on to tell me that the day of their party they went to the spa and the winery, but they made a detour on the way back to the hotel. They went to a club. Apparently, a girl from college, my soon-to-be ex, and good friends, who I have never cared for, had been wanting to go to the club. She had been telling my soon-to-be ex that she really wanted to go and the others all day. My soon-to-be ex and my buddy's wife were like no, but all the other girls were insistent. Anyway, they apparently get my soon-to-be ex really intoxicated at the winery and she says verbatim, F it, let's go to the club and see some hot guys. My buddy's wife goes, but mainly to make sure my soon-to-be ex doesn't do anything too stupid. They get to the club and they do the normal club poop. Throw money at guys and drink. Well, her friend from college whips out a hat and some furry-looking thing and says we have a soon-to-be wife here, she needs one last good night of fun. She then proceeds to get some dancer over there and is throwing money at the guy to give my soon-to-be ex a lap dance. Like I said, it is whatever, but I do not like lying. I said even though I am not happy about the lying, that really doesn't bother me. My buddy says, tell him the rest. She goes on to say that he took my wife into the back room for a private dance for all the girls. Anyway, my buddy's friend declines and goes back to the car. After about 10 minutes she goes back in to see what is going on and see my soon-to-be ex giving the gawk the dancer to completion with her friends cheering her on. Now, I swear this isn't some BS crap made up like the poop you see on sites where intimacy stars are taking women. My soon-to-be ex literally blew a dancer. My buddy's wife took pics and a video to cover her own ass when this eventually came out, no one has a clue. I asked her to send them to me and she did. I told them thank you and left. I called my brother, because he was the only person I could think to call at that moment. I knew my brother did some bouncing when he was younger, but I didn't know he worked at strip clubs. He said that was all too common. He said male dancers are actually encouraged to have the female visitors touch them as they will stay longer and spend more money. He said, I don't like to think about how many men are raising some dancers' kids. This was a few days ago and I have been trying to act normal around my soon-to-be ex. She has no clue what is going on, but I think she is beginning to suspect some things. We both have very high intimacy drives and have intimacy almost every day and we are both very affectionate. I haven't shown my soon-to-be ex any affection or had intimacy with her. I told her I have just been busy with work, the wedding, and not feeling the best. Although, she has been asking if everything is okay and do we need to talk about something. I have just blown it off as my mind just has a lot going on. Anyway, I have already made my decision to leave her. I just need some advice on what to do next. The house we live in is mine, and she is not on anything. We have separate bank accounts and have no kids. I just need some advice on canceling everything, letting people know, and basically kicking her butt out the best way with the least confrontation. I want nothing to do with her after this and for me to move on. Plus, for those that I am sure will see it was one Dr. N can mistake, shut the hell up. Alcohol does not make you do things without your control, it makes your impulses stronger. Hence the saying, sober thoughts are intoxicated actions. Plus, now I wonder if she has done this before and I just don't know. I have no trust in her and never will again. I have now lost my best friend and soon-to-be wife. Thank you to any and all for any helpful advice you can give. I am leaving my fiancé of 8 years. My soon-to-be ex was intoxicated, but had enough sense to high-five her one friend after finishing. In the video the dancer is not forcing her but she actually stops and then keeps going after. Many think this is fake and that is fine. I don't care. Honestly, if you think it is fake, that is fine. I just needed some advice. I thought all clubs were both male and female, and just varied at night. She did not plan to blackmail my soon-to-be ex. She took the video, which was only like 18 seconds, and a few pics. She knew this would come out eventually and wanted to cover her tracks with her husband. She saw that and then ran. She didn't know any of the other girls and was so surprised by what she saw, so she bolted out of fear. I am not mad at my ex, just disappointed, and to those who say you can salvage, she threw that away when she kept lying about it by not telling me. Also, no, her friends did not ruin a perfect relationship, she did. I don't believe the girls wanted us to end. They are all single women in their late 20s for which many think that casual intimacy is fine. I have no issues with people who do it, it is just not for me. I think some people on here just think that every person has some malicious intent and that the accused is just a victim of circumstance. People do messed up things sometimes of their own free will. I have no intentions of blackmailing her or telling people the info unless she wants to get nasty. Lastly, no, I don't hate women. I actually defended many women from some jerks on the thread. These are a few bad people, not women, people. Now for a quick boring update. Someone's asked about how my soon-to-be ex seemed to be like the best woman ever for me and that I had nothing bad to say about her at all other than this. Well, you are correct. To say I was a weird kid in high school is an understatement. I had long hair, colored all the time. I wore makeup and painted my nails. Dressing weird for many. She was always there for me and protected me from others, as at that age I didn't have a spine. I had a few girlfriends who I dated who said I was good looking, but they wanted me to quit wearing makeup, painting my nails, and other things. I said I am not changing for anyone, and she always defended me when these girls would talk ill of me after. So she was literally the only person I could talk to. I couldn't talk to my parents or brothers. She was the one who held me and cared for me when one of my exes started spreading nasty rumors about me, and she sat with me every night for days. So she was the perfect woman. That is why I can't confront her yet. I know I will break if I see her cry, because I will think of the memories we have together. I still love her but no longer see her as my wife and best friend. If she wants to go out and have intimacy with random people, that is her choice. Just do it single. Anyway, I stayed up late on Reddit and went to sleep on the couch, for which I have for the past week. She got up to go to work, I took off today, and woke me up to give me a hug and a kiss goodbye. In my stupor I said I love you too, and gave her a kiss. Muscle memory is a thing, it seems. Although, I noticed no feeling with the kiss like I am used to. After that I went back to sleep and woke up at 9. I got some breakfast, took a shower, and started packing her stuff up. To those who said I seemed odd and emotionless, well, I cried a lot today. I have been in damage control, and packing her stuff and seeing memories of us made me just break. I have been blaring music that keeps my mind occupied. My poor neighbors probably know my favorite music as much as I do now. In the afternoon I got a call from my buddy. Turns out my soon-to-be ex took a half day and went to their house to talk to her friend. Turns out she is having an emotional breakdown. I am not going to get into all the details, but to hit the major points. She was worried about me. She knows I am not sick. She knows when I am sick and knows I am not. She thinks I am getting cold feet about the wedding and is scared. She is extremely worried that I won't have intimacy with her or kiss her at all. In her own words, I usually can't keep him off me, which is true, but recently he won't even touch me. Not even a hug. She is wondering what is wrong and if my depression has come back worse. There is more, but that was the major point. She has no clue, my buddy's wife told me, thankfully. Then later this evening, actually just a little bit ago, she called me to say she made it to her friend's place. The conversation was brief, but I could tell she was upset. To be honest, it hurt me to hear her like this, and I wanted to hold her, but I need to do what is right for me. You know, that sounds like someone is holding back tears. That was her. She asked how I was feeling and I said better. Then we talked about the wedding and everything and just some other BS about work. She then says love you, and I say okay and say that I have food to finish and don't want to get burned. She says okay, and I tell her to be safe and have fun. She says she will and that she loves me again, and I said bye and she said bye. That is it. I know this is pretty boring, but that is what happened today. I will probably keep updating if I feel I need to for mental reasons. If not, thank you all for the help and advice. Many of you seem to think that she may have been so intoxicated that she may not remember. I am going to call my buddy's wife and ask her how intoxicated she actually was. Just got off the phone with my buddy's wife. She said that my ex was not sloshed or completely intoxicated when he left the winery, but was buzzed. She said that it surprised her that she said let's go to the club. She said they kept drinking on the way there and drank a lot more at the club. She says she was definitely wasted but not blackout intoxicated during the lap dance. I then asked her about possible drugging, as someone said. She said that she didn't see anything. Sorry for this, but I just miss my fiancé so much. I just wish she would have told me and we could have worked on it. I wish she would have told me and been remorseful. I just want my life back the way it was 2 weeks ago. I just want my fiancé home with me and for things to go back to normal. I'm about to call her and confront her. I just can't contain my emotions anymore. I know I shouldn't, but I can't help it. The stuff is killing me not knowing. Second update, thank you to all who have been so nice to me and helpful. More than likely I will not update any longer and more than likely delete this account forever and stay away from credit after this. Anyway, I called her. Took about 5 times before she answered. When she did, she asked if I was okay. Like an pissed off idiot, I basically just said that I was just peachy. What about you, who you have intimacy with now? She was confused. To which I stated I know about the dancer and I know about the gawk, just come clean. She burst into tears and said she knew I knew. I'm still crying because I can't believe she knew and didn't tell me. She said that yes, they went to club and she got a dance. I said you got more than that. She admitted to gawk and said that she was really intoxicated and made a terrible mistake but didn't know how to tell me. It was like a mistake to let some dude put their liquid kids on you and then celebrate with your friends. That sounds like a celebration. I bursted into tears about how we have been friends since we were kids, how she was the only woman I truly loved and how I only wanted her and nothing more. She said you are the best partner anyone could have and that she is so sorry and wants to fix it. I told her if she had told me from the beginning and showed remorse, but you didn't. I then asked why are you at her house. She said that this had been planned for a while now. I was like, how come I didn't know? She put it on the calendar on the fridge, but I must have not seen it. This was true, she did. I said, are you sure you aren't there? She said no really loud, and then I was like, how about before? How many times you cheated on me? She says this was the only one time she ever did that and would never do it again. I asked how you would feel if you got a gawk by some random girl. Would you be okay with that? She was like, I could forgive it if you told me. I said let's do it the other way. I ate some girl, I had her stuff all in my face and mouth and she finished on top of me. Then I came home and kissed you with that mouth. You'd forgive that? She said I don't know. Just kept saying she is sorry. Wanted to work on it. I told her the thing is getting cancelled tomorrow and the wedding is over. Your stuff will be out of my house and if you fight me on anything I will release it to everyone. She kept saying to just listen. I said fine, what? She says she was really intoxicated and that is no excuse. That I was the greatest guy in the world and we are meant to be together. That if it would help I F any girl I wanted and she would let me. I said I don't want any girl, I want you. I just wanted to marry the love of my life and be happy. You ruined that. I said F your friend, F you, and F our life. She begged me to stop talking like that and she was getting scared of what I might do to myself. I said you only care now because you don't have some strange thing in your mouth. What was it? He was hotter than me, bigger than me, more abs, taller. What was it? She said neither. I am much hotter, she said, and bigger and better in every way. I said so that is great to know, you messed it up for less than what you had. I said oh he doesn't wear makeup and nail polish and probably some jack-off who puts himself in debt for stupid shoes or shirts and some car he can't afford. She said that she loved that I did those things and thought it was attractive. Not likely, I said. None of you exes would do that. I guess I am just some sucker that thought some beautiful kind caring women actually loved me. I am getting off and going to bed and will have everything for you tomorrow. Have your dad get your stuff. She said I'm coming home right now and we are going to fix this and get things the way they were. I just hung up.
My friend and I tried the grimace shake. Those people that post themselves on TikTok aren't faking it. Michael and I were blessed with too much time and too little supervision. We were always infatuated with trends. This time, it was the McDonald's grimace shake. Teens were posting videos of themselves consuming this new, bizarrely purple shake and then acting dead, contorting their faces into lifeless masks, with the shake running down their chins. We should do it, Michael had said one afternoon, his eyes gleaming with that familiar thrill for the strange and exciting. I hesitated, remembering all the grimace shake videos we'd seen, some fun, others outright unnerving. But Michael, as always, had a talent for persuasion. We planned it meticulously, deciding that the local park, right next to an ominous, sprawling woods, would provide the perfect backdrop for our video. On the day, we biked to the McDonald's downtown, picking up 2 grimace shakes as part of the grimace meal. As the purple, frothy liquid was handed to us, I felt slightly off. How did this trend come to be? It was so out of the ordinary. People trying a drink and looking dead? It sounds stupid, but I can't lie. I was a little scared. We reached the park just as dusk settled, the setting sun casting eerie shadows against the looming woods. We propped our phone up to our car, filming the first part where we were full of enthusiasm. We took a sip. It tasted funny. It had a berry, vanilla flavor. After that, we headed over to this old park that was neighbored by a forest. We filmed my death scene when I propped myself hanging on a tree branch by my waist. My mouth was wide open, and the shot looked pretty good with the dark, eerie background of the woods. I wanted to see how it looked, so he gave me the phone and I rewatched my scene. It looked perfect. Okay, I'm gonna go find a spot, Michael said. I wasn't really paying much attention as I was looking at the phone, imagining the attention it would receive when we uploaded. I wish I looked up sooner. I began talking when I was still looking at the phone. For your scene, maybe we could have your body buried in the leaves. By the time I looked up, he was nowhere to be found. I was taken aback from the unwelcoming silence of the forest. Not a single noise. No birds, no leaves rustling, no wind. Nothing. I tried calling for him, but there was no answer. He couldn't have gone that far, I thought. Besides, I should be hearing the sound of the footprints in the leaves. But I didn't. I thought he was playing some stupid prank on me. This was going to be a part of the video, I thought. Surely. Feeling a chill crawl up my spine, I decided to head further into the woods, hoping to find Michael there. For the first time in a few minutes, I heard something. One thick, slow, crunch of leaves. It sounded maybe 50 feet away from me. I called out. Looks like you accidentally made a noise, Mike. Come out now, dude. That's when I heard another noise, but from the complete opposite side. The same, slow, thick footstep, but it sounded a little closer. Alright, stop. It's not funny. It's getting late. Can we just wrap up the video? There was a pretty thick bunch of trees directly in front of me, but I know I saw something. Some sort of movement. In between the set of thin birch trees, I saw an eye. Not a human one, but much bigger. It appeared inanimate, as the pupil didn't move or twitch. That's when I saw purple. Lots of purple. In a slow, smooth motion, a big, purple thing came around from behind the trees. I knew exactly what it was. I've seen the photos online. It looked like the same person I saw in the advertisement for the shake. That big, purple beast. I realized it now. This was the prank my friend was pulling on me. He ran away to get dressed in the costume, and now he's trying to scare the hell out of me. Part of me was a little frightened, but I still laughed. Dude, okay, this was good. You got me. That was funny. And scary. You really got me. I received no response. It just kept walking towards me. The same, slow, thick steps I heard from a distance. But this time, I heard them right in front of me. Now that it was so close, I could actually see the details. It had a pair of large, thick, inanimate eyes, and the mouth was stretched from cheek to cheek, half open. I could have sworn I saw rows of jagged teeth in there, too. A slimy trail followed it, similar to the shake that we were trying. Except something looked different. The trail was part purple, part red. Blood red. Nothing felt right. This didn't seem like some sick joke Mike would pull on me. In one last hope, I looked at the purple thing, asking one last time. Mike? Is that you? Within an instant, the beast showed me its teeth. I was right. Rows upon rows of jagged, long, sharp teeth. And suddenly, Grimace didn't look happy anymore. I don't think I have run faster in my life. I remember hearing the steps getting louder, closer, closer. But once I was out of the woods and back at the park, the sound stopped. I looked back, and it closed its mouth back to its normal look and hid its teeth. It went back to smiling, but this time, I thought it was going to start laughing at me any second. As it turned around, I saw something on its back. It was Mike, his limbs stretched and tied to its back. His eyes were gone, and his mouth was wide open. Purple liquid was drooping from his body.
I am not comfortable with my trans wife breastfeeding our 4-month-old son. I, 31, met my wife, 33, transitioned 7 years old, 5 years ago. We've been married for 2 years and have a 4-month-old boy. Our son is biologically ours, using my wife's frozen sperm. He's our only kid and everything else is going great for all three of us. I have recently started working again, reduced hours, and she is planning to stay home for another 1 to 2 months. Our son has been exclusively breastfed, by me, since I gave birth. Since 2 weeks after he was born, my wife started complaining that watching me breastfeed was making her dysphoric as she could not do the same. I tried to be understanding as this must have been difficult, but I admittedly didn't really change my behavior. My wife didn't ask me to stop breastfeeding/pumping in front of her and I don't think that would have been a reasonable request. She's brought it up many times since and to be honest I've started feeling frustrated as I feel there's an implication that I should feel bad for being able to breastfeed. However, she's never said this outright, so I don't know if that's a fair detail to include. Every time she brings it up, I try to be sympathetic, but as she acknowledged that there's nothing we can do, we continued what we were doing. Fast forward to yesterday, I came home and saw my wife breastfeeding our son. She has had both top and bottom surgery, but does not produce milk. I learned today from an article she sent that some trans women can produce milk, but she does not. I admit my initial reaction was of shock, which I regret. I asked what she was doing, and she said that she was breastfeeding our son. We had a long conversation and she asked me directly if I was uncomfortable with her doing this and I admitted that I was. She asked why and I said that I didn't know. She yelled at me quite a bit, after putting our son in his crib upstairs, about how she would never have expected me to say something so transphobic in that exact quote. It's messed up that I chose to wait until after we were married and have a kid to show my true self. I thought that this was needlessly hurtful and I cried quite a lot after she said this. We agreed to pause the convo and we had a more relaxed discussion this morning. The conversation was not particularly productive. She asked why I was uncomfortable and I said that I didn't know, but that it felt like it was not fair to our son to have him expect to be breastfed, but not actually receive any milk. She said that pacifiers do the same thing, but I'm not uncomfortable with those and TBH I think that's a good point. She said that there was no reason for me to be uncomfortable with this other than transphobia as it implied that I didn't think her dysphoria was sufficient justification to breastfeed. Honestly, I'm not sure where to go from here. I still am very uncomfortable with it, but as I mentioned, I don't know why. How should I handle this? Please help. I made a girl pass out during intimacy. I was on spring break in my senior year of high school. Met a gorgeous Brazilian girl at the club who spoke zero English. My Spanish was pretty terrible, couple that with her speaking Portuguese meaning zero verbal communication. We did have a rather intense physical attraction, though, so via her roommate and one of my friends who spoke fluent Spanish, we figured out that we both wanted to bang each other. Cut to the hotel room, things are hot and heavy, like really hot and heavy, and then out of nowhere, she looks up at me and boom, lights out. Just falls back in the bed and is out cold. I was terrified. My first thought was she overdosed on something, or that I was going to be an 18-year-old in Mexico getting charged with murder. I carried her into the bathroom and sat her up in the bathtub and poured a bucket of ice water all over her. She sprung awake. I frantically started trying to figure out what happened to her, and then again, with no warning, out cold. Head hits the bathtub. Huge bump on her forehead. I am officially geeking out. I had the number to her hotel room so I called it and thankfully her roommate had gone back for the night and she answered. Her roommate comes to my hotel room. I'm asking all kinds of questions about if she'd done any drugs that night yada yada. After her roommate arrived, she regained consciousness after about 4 minutes. I was fully clothed by this point. Important detail. So her roommate starts asking all these questions about what was wrong with her. Turns out she is mortified, to the point of passing out, at the sight of blood. I had a huge cut on my chest from bodyboarding in the ocean earlier that day, and it started to bleed while we were plowing, and when she saw it she just hit the deck. My scumbag aunt ripped off my grandma for years, so I put my nose in her business and had the IRS ruin her. My grandma was getting old, late 80s/early 90s. She had one wish, to not die in a senior home. Easily done, as my grandpa sold some assets way back when, then invested the money and let it ride for 30 plus years. He never touched it and collected a pension. Way back when my grandpa died, my grandma appointed my dad, this SHT aunt, and my uncle as the trustees of the trust. Basically the trusted advisors for her and her care for the foreseeable future. All was well in the beginning, then my dad moved further away and couldn't take care of the day-to-day upkeep as the trustee and to see that my grandma was okay. My aunt told her that she and my uncle could take over and all would be fine. It was fine for a while. A few times my dad went back to visit and noticed my grandma didn't always have overnight care, or that her mail wasn't picked up and the driveway wasn't plowed. She also lost her cable TV and newspaper subscription. My dad figured it just lapsed, so he had the services put back on. My dad also noticed my grandma was eating moldy food at times because her truck was sold and she had no transportation. She drove up to 90 years old. She basically just chilled at the house alone and did crossword puzzles. The craziest part of this is that my aunt only lived 2 miles from my grandma, but my grandma told my dad she saw my aunt only once a month on Saturday for about 1 hour. As with the elderly in age, my grandma passed away. She did get her wish and was able to die in her own home. Upon her death, things started to get real interesting. Once the probate lawyer got her children around the table, some shady business started to come out. My Aunt Rebecca asked that everyone just forego any audit or paperwork and they just sell the house and divide up the remaining bank account balance. So just signing on the line, each sibling was to get a check for $200,000, not too bad of an inheritance. My dad thought that was somewhat a little rushed. He said at the time that he wanted to wait because my grandma's house was easily in the $600,000 range based on size and location. My aunt exploded in his face, cursing at him and calling him all kinds of names because he was unwilling to sign the assets then and there. She basically wanted a quick close while everyone looked the other way. My dad ended up leaving the room after the screaming and the deal wasn't signed that day. It took nearly 6 months before another appointment and they were all back at the table. The thing is though, when you are a trustee and the person dies, the funds and access to financial accounts are all under heavy scrutiny until all beneficiaries are made aware and sign the final papers. At the next meeting, my dad went in there with no intention to sign the deal. He got his brother to agree that they audit the entire accounts going back 5 years. When they demanded this again at the meeting with the lawyer, my aunt ended up arguing that a forensic audit would cost $5,000 and it's a waste. Like, what difference does it make? 2 beneficiaries requested it, so it was what was going to happen. The audit report showed up about 3 months later. Here is where it gets good. My dad began looking over the audit report and saw it was full of holes, like excessive monthly food costs for a 90-year-old lady. Payments made for car services for a car my grandma no longer had. Many different things, and there just didn't add up. My dad asked me to give the audit a second look, so I spent a Saturday night going over it, and here is some crazy stuff I found. Costco monthly food costs of $1,100, $2,000 for the last 4 years. Telephone bills for 6 cell phones. Gasoline for a truck my grandma didn't have for years at easily $400 per month. House repairs were paid to my aunt's husband who owned a construction business. Some of the house repairs were like $16,000 for a new roof, new garage doors, home security system, all at inflated prices. Grandma paid for my aunt to go to Europe twice on vacation. My grandma was paying my estranged Aunt Becky a stipend of $2,000 a month for the last 5 years, as well as her deadbeat son for $2,500. Every month they were paid. All grandkids were to be paid a lump sum of $10,000 upon their 30th birthday, as that is when the $50 check from grandma stopped for all grandkids. Guess who was paid out? Her kids and my estranged aunt's kids, but not me or my siblings. My grandma gave loans to my Aunt Rebecca for her husband's construction business in return for equity in the company, which amounted to nothing. These loans totaled about $200,000 over 3 years, right around when the housing bust happened. They also sold her assets like jewelry for cash, because some big ticket items simply vanished from her house. Armed with all this information, the next probate meeting was interesting. In the time between my grandma's death and the third probate meeting, my aunt's construction business filed for bankruptcy, so that $200,000 in equity grandma used to have had simply vanished. The probate lawyer was also somewhat concerned and made it obvious that this was fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, where my aunt could actually get real prison time. After this, the negotiations were much more favorable. My aunt got nothing, literally zero. My other aunt only received $25,000 after all the stipend payments. My father and uncle shared the rest, after all grandkids received the $10,000 payout. The house sold at the first offer for $520,000. That was the regular revenge for any treacherous beach that ripped off grandma and had her eating moldy food. Here is the pro. My aunt probably felt pretty bad that she couldn't supplement her lifestyle with grandma's money anymore, but that was the least of her worries. Since she tried to personally rip me off for $10,000, I took it personally. I don't care how tough you are, the IRS is the scariest thing that can happen to a person. Nobody wants to have their money forcibly removed. I did a little research, photocopied my documents, had them notarized and sent off to the IRS. I felt like it went nowhere. Then maybe 18 months later I was notified and asked to come to the IRS building for an appointment in my city. The agent went over all the details, what they found in their research, and then they asked for a sworn statement. It turns out my aunt didn't declare something like $1.2 million in additional income over 5 years, and as such she owed the IRS around $420,000 plus penalties. There was no way she was going to pay that on a teacher's pension. Her house was sold, her vehicles sold, and they left the state. Now, my aunt and uncle live in a depressing desert town like this in the Southwest. The IRS paid me around $60,000 about 3 months after the appointment. She should have paid that $10,000. My lost ring fell from the sky. Couple of years ago I lost a ring my grandmom got me for Christmas. I wore this ring 24/7 and rarely ever took it off. However, when I did take it off, I always put it in the same place so I wouldn't lose it. This ring meant a lot to me because sadly my grandmom passed away from cancer shortly after. One day I remember looking down at my hand and starting to panic because my ring wasn't on my finger. Before getting really upset I went and checked my usual spot where I put it but it wasn't there. I remember telling my family and having them search the whole house. Anyways, I lost it a couple weeks before Christmas, so they told me they'd get me another. After they told me this, I went down my basement to do my wash and when I was putting my clothes in the dryer, I felt something hit my head and fall onto the floor in front of me. Lo and behold, it was my ring. It literally fell out of thin air. I told myself it was a little message from my grandmom but it was one of the weirdest things. Still to this day, I think about it.
I sold a priceless emerald ring to a pawn shop after my gambling ex-husband left us penniless. Since I left my husband and lost my job, I have struggled to make ends meet. So when I saw an opportunity to make more money for my children I jumped. Over the years, I rejected acts of charity from friends and family, too proud to take their money or admit that I was in serious trouble. But when we were evicted from our family home, I thought enough is enough. My ex-husband had a serious gambling problem while I kept changing jobs, perpetually unhappy with every role I had, so money became inconsistent and, if left alone with my ex, a work of fiction. My mom had the most beautiful emerald ring. It was gifted to her by my great-grandmother who came across to the States during World War II, and therefore it was my mother's prized possession, so when she gave it to me as a gesture of goodwill, I was struck by the sentiment, but also the value. I would never have considered it an asset before, but we are so desperate for food and a stable place to live. Before we walked out, my ex-husband totaled up more debt than I thought possible and refused to pay a penny. There is a local pawn shop down our street, and I knew they would take this ring. I planned to sell them on the ring, get the money and then claim that it has been lost to our insurers and use that money to buy it back. I would have enough money to secure a flat and my family wouldn't lose their war-torn treasure. I told my ex-husband, and although he said it was a stupid idea, he was friends with a friend of the pawn shop owner and therefore, agreed to make sure that the ring would not be sold onto a third party. I dropped off the ring, with the strict instruction that my friend ex-husband would stop by at the end of the week to buy it. With a joyous $6,000 in my hand, I put down money on a rental deposit, purchased enough food for the month and applied for a new job. It was the most peaceful I had felt in a while, but this was short-lived. 4 days go by, and I call my ex asking him if he had the ring. He told me that someone had come in and purchased the ring. I shouted, "How did you let that happen? You had one job. What am I going to do?" He apologized and said, "The guy in the shop was new. I don't think anyone passed on the message." He was the only one on site when I arrived. Panicked, I confronted the staff at the pawn shop, confused, and they asked me why I wanted the ring back and I told them the story of my heroic great-grandmother fighting her way through war-torn Europe to find freedom in America. At least when I called the insurance company, I could honestly tell them that I didn't have the ring, but I had no idea what I was meant to say to my mother when she saw me without it, so I said that it was being polished. I felt terrible for lying to her but I needed more time before telling her the truth. My ex-husband repeated how he felt about my contacting the insurance company, which I thought was weird because he wouldn't let it go. When I said that I held him partly responsible for my financial desperation, he became angry and said that I wasn't being fair. It must have upset him because 2 days ago, the police arrived at my door and arrested me on suspicion of fraud and the selling of stolen goods. My ex-husband had not only bought the ring, given it to his new girlfriend and lied to me about it, but he also reported me to the police and told them my plan about claiming the insurance money so I could buy the ring back from the pawn shop. Apparently, he is still set on getting revenge after I filed for divorce because of his gambling problems. I am currently on bail pending further investigation into the allegations made against me by my ex, but at least my children will be moving to a better part of town.
My ex wrote a book about me, now everyone knows about my tiny penis. A few days ago I got an email from my ex-girlfriend with the subject line, "I did it, thanks to you." The email had an attachment. The attachment was a manuscript. The manuscript was an autobiography written by my ex-girlfriend. The title of the autobiography instantly took me back to the time when my ex-girlfriend and I were still dating. I was actually inexperienced back in those days whereas my ex-girlfriend had more than enough intimate experience. We enjoyed talking about past relationships and what the intimacy was like. It was never a thing in our relationship. Just casual conversation. My ex-girlfriend had more stories to tell and all of them were entertaining. I remember joking about how she should someday write a book. We laughed, made love, and a few months later, our relationship came to an end. It was sad, but alas, life continued. We're now back in the present. I finished reading the manuscript an hour ago. There were 72 chapters. Each chapter was about an individual person my ex-girlfriend had known sexually. No real names were mentioned. Only character labels. Like the surfer, the biker, the jock, the older man. Some of the stories and characters I actually remembered based on the details my ex-girlfriend shared with me during our relationship. Others were totally new. But new or not, it was fun to read. Until I made it to chapter 39. My chapter. The turtle. Keep in mind, all the intimate partners my ex-girlfriend mentioned in her manuscript had something specific about them that made the intimacy memorable for her. For example, the surfer always smelled like the ocean, which never failed to turn her on. The biker had gang tattoos from the neck down, but the one tattoo that always made her rip his clothes off was his pet hamster tattoo. Then there was me. A guy who couldn't swim, let alone surf, no tattoos, and with practically zero intimate experience at the time. What was so memorable about me? Well, according to my chapter, the answer was my adorably small penis. My ex-girlfriend described how she had almost forgotten what it felt like not to choke during oral before she met me. She compared my penis to the head of a baby turtle, thus my chapter and character name. Based on what I was reading, not only did I have the smallest penis compared to all the other people she's dated, but I also had the only penis that somehow managed to look too innocent for intimacy. It didn't come across as if my ex-girlfriend was purposefully trying to insult me, but come on, I think most people can understand what a sensitive topic penis size can be to any guy who's not hung like a horse. I still need to contact my ex-girlfriend and provide my feedback, but I'm gonna need some time to process what I read. It's not every day someone writes a book about your small pee-pee. Why we don't see Uncle Mark anymore. So, this was told to me by my dad over a drink recently. He'd gotten a little drunk and ended up admitting it to me, said it's been too long now and he'd paid the consequences so there was nothing to come back on him. Only reason I'm posting this. Uncle Mark was my favorite uncle when I was a child. He always invited me around to show me his airsoft gun collection, hide and seek parties with my friends and even took us to the beach. He would always come with sweets for us and acted like one of us, another child who just wanted to have fun. But then, the day I, 7 years old, was meant to be going around because we were going for a ride to this amazing place. My dad was happy and cheerful for the entire day. He was going on about how much he loved the fact his brother wanted to be in his children's life. Until he got a call. I was in my room, packing my stuff when I heard the most blood-curdling scream from my dad. He was screaming and raging. I heard him rip open our front door and slam it back shut with enough force to make the picture next to it fall off the wall. I didn't see my dad for a long while after that, and he never told me why until we had this talk, but that shall be explained at the end. Mom had a lot of money saved up from a minor lotto win, so we were okay, and she always smiled and said Daddy is just away for a little while because he was looking after me and my siblings whenever I asked where he was. Uncle Mark didn't come around either during this time, but we did see him in town a couple times. Funnily enough, he ran away the moment my mom saw me waving at him. 9 months later, Dad came home and I excitedly ran and hugged him. He hugged me right on back with a good squeeze. We had a party to celebrate him coming home. We had Perry food and cake and all the usual stuff. I was just happy my dad was home though. A week or so later, Dad sat me down with the other children and explained that Uncle Mark wouldn't be coming around anymore. When asked why, he just said Uncle Mark was a bad person and that if he ever tried to talk to us, we were to ignore him and come find one of them. We all agreed because my dad always knew best after all. One day, a year or so later, 9 at this point, I'm coming out of school to wait for my parents to pick me up. My other siblings were either at secondary school or too young for school, so it was just me. I see Uncle Mark stood there with a big grin. I get nervous when he comes up to me, saying he's here to take me for a ride. I tell him I'm not supposed to talk to him, that he's a bad person like my dad said. Uncle Mark got this scary look on his face for a second, then told me it was all good and his parents had changed their mind and made to take my hand. That's when I saw my dad just appear. My dad punched Uncle Mark right in the face and little old me saw blood fly as Uncle Mark went sprawling. I didn't see much after that except Uncle Mark running away with my dad chasing him. He came back after a little while, sighed and took me in a hug. He told my mom to take me home and that he'd see us later. I don't know why, but I knew there and then it would be a long time before I ever saw my dad again. And I was right. 5 years. 5 years my dad was gone. My mom eventually admitted to us that he was in prison for protecting us and we all guessed he'd done something to Uncle Mark. And he had. Turns out Uncle Mark liked kids. He liked them a lot. And that day I was meant to go to his house. My aunt, Uncle Mark's wife, had called my dad and told him she'd found some pictures under her and Mark's bed of children and she was scared of what to do because Mark was a big man and it was later revealed he abused her, so she was scared to call the police on him. And my dad had gone into a rage and stormed over to his house. He'd smashed in the door to find Uncle Mark screaming at my aunt as she waved the pictures around in hysterics. My dad had beaten Uncle Mark within an inch of his life, Uncle Mark screaming he'd make him pay as the police had arrested my dad. Messed up thing was, by the time my dad had explained why he had done it, Mark managed to get the pictures, burned them and scared his wife into saying nothing, so there was no evidence. My dad was sent down for assault but made sure my other uncles and older cousins were around to protect us in case Mark came back. But oh no. Mark waited until my dad thought we were safe, and then, according to my dad, had come to kidnap me from the school right under their noses. Who would stop him? People didn't believe my dad when he explained Mark was a predator. They thought he was just excusing himself for attacking him. After all, the police hadn't found anything and his wife said my dad was a liar, whereas my dad was the big angry guy with a few assaults under his belt already. So all they saw was my nice uncle here to pick me up. He had gotten away from my dad at the school. My dad had tripped and it gave him the chance to run. But my dad knew where he would go. Knew Uncle Mark would run home to hide and more than likely destroy any evidence he had gotten since destroying the last lot. He also knew the police would be on his tail for the attack on the school, so he didn't have long. Difference was, though, my dad had his car while Uncle Mark was on foot. So, he drove over and demanded to know if my aunt was going to lie again. after what Uncle Mark had just tried to pull. Now, I don't like my aunt much after what she pulled the first time, but I think in that moment she really realized what a monster my uncle was. He was willing to do this to her nephew just for pathetic revenge for being called out as a predator. She said she wouldn't stop my dad or save Mark this time. My dad ordered her to get all the evidence she could as he waited for Mark to appear. She came back down with pictures. Lots of pictures. He then told her to go, wait 1 hour and then call the police. He was ending this. And as Uncle Mark appeared, my dad, who had been waiting behind the wall of his garden, slammed him through the door of his house, and then proceeded to beat him to death in his doorway. He apparently towards the end couldn't see the floor through the blood. My dad was arrested on murder and did so without resistance, only saying he wished they'd done his job for him. But when it was revealed that Uncle Mark was indeed a predator who had attempted to kidnap me and the fact that they had to face the fact they had allowed a predator to run free, he was instead charged for manslaughter, his lawyer stating my father had gone into a protective rage and had only intended to render him harmless. Funnily enough, no one argued in defense of the predator for my dad getting the murder charges. He said he didn't regret it, but that he wished he had done something else purely so that he didn't miss out on so much of my life. I told him I was forever going to be proud of him for that, and that I loved him. I was a bit shocked I wasn't told just what Uncle Mark was for so long, but my dad asked if it would have made it any better to be told as a child what he really was, or now as a man who can handle the truth. And he was right. Me as a child would not have been able to mentally handle it. I'm barely able to handle it now. Parents with nanny cameras, what crazy things did you catch your babysitter doing? My grandpa on my mom's side was staying at my house to watch my younger siblings. But they figured it best to hire a regular sitter to watch my younger siblings overnight, since they didn't think my grandpa was up to the task since he's older. My parents were attending a wedding a couple of hours away and made plans to spend the night in a hotel nearby. They had set up a nanny cam in a couple of rooms, my siblings' bedroom, the master bedroom, the living room, and the kitchen. All motion activated. They normally wouldn't bother looking through the footage if everything seemed fine, upon returning home. However, when they returned, they noticed that the cam in the master bedroom had been triggered. The master bedroom cam had never been triggered before, so they decided to take a look. They were both utterly shocked and terrified to see footage of my grandpa and the sitter both naked and aggressively making out from the entrance of the room, staggering, while intertwined towards the bed. Then banged on my parents' bed aggressively for about 20 minutes. The sitter was about 20 years old, and my grandpa was 71 at the time. My dad called me immediately after he saw the footage, laughing his ass off, and I could hear my mom crying in the background, completely mortified from what she had just witnessed, and shouting at my dad to throw out the sheets and kick out grandpa. My mom called the sitter to confront her, and she just apologized and said there was a connection between them and some other bullshit stuff. When she asked my grandpa what he was thinking, he just said, "At my age, you must seize every opportunity." I wish there were audio for the buildup. I lay awake at night sometimes, wondering what kind of game my grandpa was talking in order to get in that sitter's pants. I reported a guy for child videos and he got away. I work at a computer repair shop. I was downloading hardware drivers to a customer computer when I noticed 3 thumbnails in his downloads folder. The file names were random alphanumeric digits. The rest of the folder was filled with compressed, zip, files that all had the same alphanumeric names, so I assumed that they were all just filled with the same sort of stuff. The thumbnails of the uncompressed files were very obviously underage children. That's all I will say about them. Graphic, I didn't know what to do, so I just executed the driver packages and finished my work while debating whether or not to call the police. Normally I wouldn't have to deliberate about what to do in a situation like this, but at the time I had just went through my savings on house repairs and couldn't afford to miss days of work if I was required to deal with court bull. I also figured that this guy probably downloaded this crap and didn't create it as he was a student. A great way to make things seem a tad less messed up. Dumb, I know. I gave the computer back to the guy and went about my business. After a few hours I started to feel guilty and talked to my wife and a good friend about it. Then the next day I called the RCMP and told them what I had seen. A police officer showed up very promptly and asked questions. I gave the officer the guy's name and address, but they couldn't track him down. Then I realized that the shop cameras saw him arrive in a cab and that the cab most likely picked him up at home. I told the police and they tracked him down. Anyway, a few weeks later, after having to describe what I saw in detail, nightmare fuel, the cop called me and told me that they had seized the computer. Since then I've been waiting to see any news or hear anything. It's almost been a year. But nothing. Yesterday I got a call from the constable that I had been dealing with and he said that the charges had been dropped. Like, what? I am furious. He said that there was a warrant for his arrest after they found what was on his computer, but he was evasive and they couldn't find him. Then all of a sudden the charges were dropped. Awful. Right on my doorstep. I am also assuming that he got away based on the fact that I didn't just give the computer to the cops. I feel like such a craphead.
My demanding sister and mother want me to watch her new baby 7 days a week. I told them to pick the baby back up or I will call CPS for abandonment. For the last few weeks of my younger sister's pregnancy, she has been demanding that my husband and I babysit her newborn every weekend, Friday morning to Sunday evening, so she and her husband can have some cool-off time from being parents. Each time, I have laughed at her and shut it down with a quick, "Nope, I won't be." And she gets mad that I'm not helping her out. She then got our mother involved. Mom called me and asked why I was being a self-centered bitch, so selfish, and that she didn't raise me this way. I told her I was a grown-ass woman, with my own house and life, that if I wanted to watch kids as a second job, I'd effing have some. She sputtered out something about me being a horrible person and hung up on me. My husband and my one aunt 100% are with me. However, my mom, dad, the other 900 family members, and friends got involved calling me out on Facebook or blowing up my phone. My mom knows the full story of what my sister is asking. She sees no issues with my sister getting this as well. She essentially did the same thing with me when I was a bit older when I had to take care of my younger sister so she could have time to relax. I have never had a good relationship with my family besides my youngest sister, aunt, and grandparents. I talk to my mom, other sister, and dad maybe twice a month. So whenever family/friends message me about babysitting or give me poop about it, my favorite response has been, "You're right, I am selfish and irresponsible, and probably not fit to take the baby this weekend, but I can be sure to let sister know you volunteered your time this week to help her out." Funny enough, everyone seems to have some generic excuse as to why they can't or won't, like, "I worked all week, it's my wind down time, not my child, not my responsibility." But somehow it's mine? My all-time favorite response is, "It is your responsibility as the oldest to ensure your siblings don't make mistakes, and if they do, you take responsibility and don't let them ruin their lives over it. They're still kids who need to have fun." You had your turn. When the baby was just under 2 weeks, my sister, her husband, and our mother left multiple messages and voicemails about when they would drop the baby off. Besides a quick "not watching your baby this weekend," I have not answered or responded about it. My husband and I took some advice from my aunt to invest in a doorbell camera because my mother and sister attempted to drop the baby off at my doorstep, 6 days after it was born. Knocked, and tried to run. I spoke through the doorbell and told them they had exactly 2 minutes to pick the baby back up, or I was calling CPS for abandonment. My youngest sister, 16F, called me about an hour afterward explaining our mother had attempted to leave the baby with her as well, but it only earned mom a dirty look, while the youngest sister simply stepped over the carrier and walked out of the house. She has been staying with us since. We have a meeting with a lawyer to see if we have any ground to stand on for her to come and live with us permanently, as our parents are threatening to call the police on my husband and me for kidnapping our youngest sister as a hostage. Oh, before I forget this level of beautiful petty. Our aunt, the only one who has supported us, surprised my youngest sister, husband, and me, took us out to her cabin for the weekend. Where youngest sister posted pictures and tagged our mother, sister, and her husband with caption, "Man, such an amazing weekend, sure wish you guys were free to join."
I canceled Mother's Day celebration after hearing my wife tell my son that she's not his mom. My ex-wife passed away, and I have a 13-year-old son. My wife has a 16-year-old daughter from another relationship. The family is often on pretty good terms. My son is the quiet one in the house. He keeps to himself a lot but not to the point of being concerned. My wife and stepdaughter are the complete opposite. They both encourage him to be outgoing and share activities, and join gatherings with extended family. My son doesn't love it, and they all respect it most times. As Mother's Day was approaching, I wanted to throw my wife a surprise Mother's Day celebration where we planned to celebrate at the restaurant and invited her family there. It was no longer a surprise because my stepdaughter told her by accident. Yesterday I got off work early to get the final arrangements done. I had the key, and while I was entering the house through the front door, I overheard my wife and stepdaughter talking to my son. My wife was asking my son if he stay home and not go with them to the restaurant to celebrate. I paused and decided to keep listening. My son asked why, and she told him that his introverted and socially inept attitude will make her family uncomfortable, lose their appetite, and will ruin the mood. He promised her that he'd be well behaved and would try to interact and socialize with everyone, but she said that she wasn't buying it. He kept reassuring her, but she snapped and told him that technically, she's not his mom, so she didn't get why he wanted to celebrate Mother's Day with her so badly. She said he should go cry on your dead mom's grave instead. My stepdaughter kept on throwing backhanded comments and shades too along the lines of "my mom is not your mom." I went inside and all of them were shocked to see me standing there. Wife and daughter were staring without saying anything. I told my son and his stepsister to go to their rooms, then told my wife that the celebration was off, cancelled. She tried to argue, asking why repeatedly, and I told her that she knew why. She tried to explain that she didn't mean it like that and that I only heard part of the conversation but not all of it. I told her I was done arguing, and that the decision was already made. She yelled, asking what she was going to tell her family. I ignored her while she kept throwing a tantrum after a tantrum. Early this morning, she took my stepdaughter and went to stay with her folks. Not a single call or text from her so far. She said that I was making a tremendous mistake, but I think the tremendous mistake was marrying her. What's the most devious prank you've ever pulled off? A few of my roommates and myself had been engaging in a rather lengthy prank war. It was small potato stuff like turning on the water when someone was in the shower, or setting someone's alarm for 4 a.m., and filling someone's room with a fog machine while they slept and then running in and yelling fire. This one time, I came home during my 15-minute work break during a party for one of said roommate's birthday. I was tired as hell and still had another 4 hours left to my shift and just wanted to come home, have a beer and wish him a happy birthday. I grabbed a beer, walked up to my room, which was a crappy attic space on the 3rd story, opened the door, and there was flour coating the entire floor of my room. I was pissed. It got inside my computer, it was in my shoes, it was on my bed. I also mistakenly made the choice to try and use my vacuum to try and pick some of it up, and which subsequently broke my vacuum. I was going to get the sucker back for it, but wasn't sure who. I asked one of my roommates A, who immediately blamed roommate B. It was roommate B's birthday at the time, so I let it pass that night, but the next day or two I dumped some of the flour from my room into the driver's seat of his car, which subsequently got into his air vents and messed up his AC for a while. Little did I know it was roommate A all along who had done the original pranking. Well, me and roommate B decided to teach him a lesson. Roommate A went on a 3-month study abroad thing in Spain for the summer the next month. Roommate B had recently learned he could unscrew the door jamb that was directly in front of the handle portion of roommate A's door. This allowed us to jimmy a credit card and a paper clip and easily unlock his room at any time. Roommate A leaves for the summer. We wish him a good time, and no sooner had he left we set out our revenge. Over the course of the next 2-3 months we painted his entire room the brightest shade of schoolgirl pink, and then we painted a lovely unicorn mural and flying cherub versions of all the roommates. To top it off, we got a ton of glitter and spray glued it to the unicorn, which was directly above his bed. He would get glitter in his bed and in his chest hair pretty much every night. For some reason girls he brought over didn't seem to be as repulsed by it as we had thought, but it was a good prank all said. What's the worst thing you've ever done for money? I spent weeks in a toxic netherworld, and it likely took years off my life. I'd run out of money after traveling for 5 years. It was in Singapore, early 90s, I was 35 years old, and utterly unsure of what the hell to do with myself. But then I got hired by an American crew to help out with patching and painting rust on the 100 feet steel sailboat they inhabited, called Tam. The first few weeks were fine. They served me a nice hot lunch daily, and were amiable enough. One day the skipper says, "You're done. Great job. We really like your work ethic and attention to detail. But we're out of rust for you to patch, unless you'd like to do the bilge." For non-nautically inclined readers, the bilge is the very bottom of the inside of a boat. Commonly it's a horrible place, with leaked-in seawater, spilled diesel, roaches, rats, and worse. But on Tam, there was nothing nasty down there. They ran a very clean ship. However, there were hundreds of rusted spots all over the inside of her steel hull, below the lower cabin floor. I took a look, and then, because I had nothing better and needed to eat, took the job. My assignment was to go in, chip off the rust with a pneumatic nail gun, get it down to bare metal, quickly give it 2 coats of primer, then a day later, 2 coats of US Navy grade rust paint. This stuff was the best anti-rust paint made, but was so toxic it was not sold to the general boating public. The owner of the boat was, I was told, a big shot friend of Steven Spielberg, and thus had some connections in the Navy who'd gotten him this paint. This was why Tam's bilge was so pristine. But this paint was so poisonous you had to wear charcoal filtered breathing apparatus when using it, even outdoors. In addition, you had to be sure to replace the filters every 8 hours, or you were breathing some of the most dangerous vapors ever created by mankind. There was no space higher than 4 feet in the bilge, so I sat or I laid down. As well as the filter mask, I wore safety goggles, earplugs, gloves, coveralls, and a sarong around my head because it was around 100 degrees down there and sweat would constantly stream into my eyes if I didn't. It was an incredibly stifling and enclosed place to be with all those chemicals. The huge racket made by the nail gun, which battered the hull of the boat like a machine gun, was so loud I was told it could be heard a kilometer away. I trusted in my earplugs and mask, even keeping a written record of the hours for each set of filters. I felt no physical ill effects. But I wondered if I was going insane down there. What had become of my life, my singular life? My life of travel, strange lands, amazing people, great books and mind-blowing experiences? I had no answers, other than, you're broke now. It's over. I would pick an area to do each day. It went like this. I had to get primer on the bare steel within 30 minutes of exposing it, or rust would already be starting at the microscopic level and then the fix wouldn't take. I had to be organized and disciplined, with my safety gear, trouble lamp, nail gun, sandpaper, primer, final coat, clean brushes, and rags for spills, all while in a toxic netherworld. I remember once getting so hot and breathless that in a panic I ripped off the mask to get air, forgetting about all the fumes from the Navy paint. The experience was akin to having a hose blasting all the evil gases from the 9th ring of hell down your sinuses and throat. I immediately burst out the hatch to the air-conditioned cabin above, much to the shock of the other crew doing their daily maintenance. "Oh God, did you breathe in some fumes from that paint?" asked the skipper. "Right your will, dude," shouted one of the crewmen. I recovered my breath and demeanor, said something funny and cynical enough to make them all laugh, and went back in. The bilge project went on for weeks. When I told him I was finished, the skipper went down for a look and pronounced my work flawless. Such was the only non-awful part of that job, a moment of praise. Things got better not long after that, and I never worked on a yacht again. I have, however, enjoyed sailing on more than a few since then. My husband cannot accept I don't like mustard. We've been married 2 years, dating 5. We are both 34. I'm a woman, he's a man, if it matters. I'm not a picky eater. In fact, I'm quite adventurous, and every time I've traveled I've always made it a point to try dishes with unusual/uncommon ingredients to say I've tried them. There are very few foods I won't eat. One of them is mustard, the condiment. I don't like it. I just don't. The taste is very strong and overpowering, and it's an unpleasant taste. I've tried yellow, stone ground, honey, artisan, brown, spicy, you name it. I have tried them all. And I just don't like them. My husband for some reason never understood this. He loves mustard, especially honey mustard. He puts it on all his sandwiches, dips his fries in it. And every time he tries to force me to try it, he'll insist I'll like it this time. I'm a grown-ass woman. I know what I don't like. And I don't like mustard. So I'll say no and it'll devolve into a mini argument where he'll call me picky. Well, last night we were on the road home from a weekend trip we took together and he stopped at a gas station to get us a quick bite. He got a hot dog slathered in mustard. I got one but decided to keep it plain. I don't really love hot dogs to begin with, but I will eat them. While we waited in line he asked what I got on mine. I told him nothing. He actually got furious and grabbed it from me. He marched over to the condiment station and began putting mustard on my hot dog, telling me to grow up and stop being picky. I just walked out and sat in the car. I didn't even want the damn hot dog anymore. My appetite was gone. He came back and began screaming at me for embarrassing him even further. The word divorce was said for the first time ever. I secretly recorded his screaming because I was genuinely afraid I would die. He was driving erratically, swerving and speeding. I'm in a hotel tonight. He ignored me all day at work and then the calls started around. When he realized I wasn't coming home. Non-stop voicemails and texts. He sent me a screenshot of a Google search for local divorce lawyers. I haven't eaten all day and I've been sobbing in this damn hotel room. I don't want to get divorced and I wish I had just ate the mustard. Someone, anyone, please give me an explanation. Am I in danger? Why would he react this way to a preference of mine? I'm completely broken right now.
What did you do drunk, that sober you really appreciated? We booked out a hotel room and got trashed before going out. Think 6 guys chugging on a ton of beer and eating snacks for about 5 hours. There was a lot of stuff strewn around the room, topped off by a few smashed bottles in the bathroom, because my friend thought the bath was full of cold water, but it was actually empty. I ended up coming back before everybody else and fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, the room was spotless. My friend who was sharing the room with me told me he came home to find all the empty cans crushed and bagged up, with all the snack rubbish in the bin. I'd even gone into the bathroom and picked up every shard of glass, and made sure I'd washed the small shards out of the bathtub with the shower. I'd even cleaned the surfaces. The maid service would have had literally nothing to do other than make the beds. Meant that when we woke up the next morning, feeling worse for wear, we had absolutely nothing to tidy. When we went to our friend's room, which we hadn't spent any time in, they'd absolutely trashed it in between getting home and falling asleep. I don't think my friend had ever loved me more than he did that morning.
My abusive mother beat and hospitalized me. I want to make sure she faces the consequences. Ever since I, 18F, was young, my mother would put hands on me. I'm talking she laid the smack down on me with the fury of 1,000 suns. She would use belts, wires or hangers, anything she could get her hands on, she would use. She would do this if I did something as simple as dropping a plate or spilled my drink aged 10. The final straw occurred when she started laying hands on me when I got home from school because she thought I was having intimacy in my high school bathroom with seniors after school because I was late coming home. I was a freshman at the time. She lost it completely and was throwing pots and pans at me, snatching my weave, clobbering me in the face. After a blow I fell and hit the back of my head on the stove. It got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore and pulled a blade on her. She charged at me anyway and I had to swing it. She now has a scar on her chin. This landed my siblings and I in the custody of CPS. I then ended up in the custody of my grandmother about 2 hours away permanently while my mother worked hard to regain custody of my other siblings after about 1.5 years of them being in the custody of a different family member. She stopped talking to me for a couple of years, but as time went by, we started building a relationship back up again as I wanted to forgive her. It took some time, but we got there. This year I moved back into my mother's and agreed to help her out with work. After about 5 months living with her and my younger siblings, I was home one day getting ready to go on a hike with my aunt. As I was walking out of my room to depart on my trip, all hell broke loose. My mom lost her mind completely and laid hands on me for about 15 minutes straight. She dragged me on the floor, clawed my face, started slamming my dome on the floor, socked me in the ribs while pinning me on the floor by my hair, pulled my hair to drag me around, slapped me around, threw objects at me. Even when I tried to leave, she just wouldn't stop. It was like the Undertaker going up against a low-card nobody. I didn't fight back. I know it's hard to believe, but I just couldn't. I froze. All of my siblings were there watching. I didn't want them to see that. They didn't deserve to see that. They were crying and shaking in a corner just watching it all unfold. My younger brother had to ultimately get in between me and my mom to get her to stop. When I left the house, my aunt asked my mother why she did it and my mother said it was because she saw me flip her off on my way out of the house, which is completely false. I ended up in the ER because of a throbbing headache and pain all throughout my body and constant nausea. I walked out with a grade 1 concussion, bruised ribs on both sides, horrible scratches on my face and body aches and bruises that lasted for days and a strained lower back. My family was on my side for about a day, but then I started getting calls from my mom's parents, her sisters, and her cousins begging me to not press charges on my mother. Their reasons being, at the end of the day she's still your mom, who's going to watch your siblings, she just got a really good job, don't ruin it for her. You only get one mother in this lifetime, remember that I don't know what to do, my whole family is making me feel so bad about it, but if this were anyone else, I would not hesitate to press charges.
What is the most heartwarming scene you have ever witnessed in a public place? In flight between San Francisco and Fort Wayne. It was clear that the kid across the aisle from me was flying alone, maybe visiting her grandparents or being shuttled from one divorced parent to the other. When the flight attendant comes by to take drink orders, I ask if I might have 2 of their little bottles of water. I'm a weightlifter and a pretty big guy. The attendant nods, then without missing a beat the kid gets a mischievous grin on her face and pipes up, "And I'll have 2 Cokes, please." The row behind her on the plane cracks up. The flight attendant glances back at me and quips, "See what you started?" The kid beams. The airline had sat her alone in the row. I guess I can understand why, but it's a long flight for a kid alone. She's singing a catchy little tune to herself, and so when the drinks are delivered I decide to make conversation, asking her what she's singing. "Oh that," she says, clearly happy to have someone to talk to. "Well, Grandma's always surprised when I visit by plane. You know, how far you can come and how fast. I don't think they had many planes when she was little. I mean, seriously, they had a horse. Anyway, Grandma would tell me that she'd think of me from time to time and say to herself, 'I wonder where you are. I wonder where you are going.' Then she'd always add, 'Someplace important, I'm sure.' I made it into a song for us. I love my grandma. Right now I'm on my way to Grandma's house and I'm just singing that song to myself and thinking the same about her. I wonder where you are. I wonder where you are going. That's all." "Wow," I say, "that's really sweet. So, is it just you and Grandma, or is your mom or dad coming out later?" "Oh, everyone will be there and Mom's been out for 2 weeks already, making arrangements." "Arrangements?" "For Grandma's funeral." Boom. It was like being hit in the gut. In retrospect maybe I should have seen it coming. A huge frog takes up residence in my throat and I realize she's been singing, "I wonder where you are." About her grandma who's gone. Seeing my distress she reaches across the aisle to pat me on the arm. "Don't feel sad," she says. "Grandma lived a really long and happy life and at the end she was getting pretty tired." I just nod, unable to speak. We land and say our goodbyes as the stewardess hurries back to get her, a little girl with a brave smile waving goodbye to a 6 feet 4 inches, 259-pound brute trying desperately not to cry like, well, a little girl. Away she goes, full of life and courage, singing her little song. Sometimes when I see a family at the supermarket or ice cream stand I'll think of that kid and start humming her song. I wonder where you are. I wonder where you're going. Someplace important, I'm sure. Who's the dumbest person you've ever met? It's not uncommon as a teacher to have students who are a bit behind the curve in certain aspects, but 99% of the time they are keen on something. They might not understand how to identify a noun or what the theme is, but they somehow know how to make a mean plate of nachos. You learn pretty quickly to not judge fish for their tree climbing ability, you know? I thought this was the rule when I was teaching until I met Kevin. Kevin isn't his real name, but it doesn't matter because he can't spell it anyway. Kevin was a student of mine during my last year of teaching. He came to my classroom with very little to show for his academic past. He had moved a few times and thus was missing a lot of typical test scores that we used to try and ballpark their ability. Don't worry, it was a ballpark. We didn't make major decisions until we actually had a chance to talk and work with a student for a bit. I thought that's fine. I'll just do some one-on-one with Kevin and see what's up. One-on-one with Kevin was like conversing with someone who'd forgotten everything in a freak, if not impossible, amnesia incident. There was no evidence that he had learned anything past the 2nd grade. And now he is in 9th grade. Flabbergasted, I figured we needed to get more serious with this. If he was going to be in my class, I needed to know why and how. I decided to meet with him, his guidance counselor, his parents, and another teacher to see what was really going on. This is where it all became clear. It was by some incredible fluke that his family hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth years ago. Odds are his entire heritage was based on blind luck and some type of sick divine intervention that saves his family every time a threat presents itself. Kevin was the genetic pinnacle of this null achievement. Even my instructional lead, a woman who could find a redeeming trait in a Balrog, failed to see any reason this kid or his family should be alive today. So here's a list of events that made it abundantly clear that God exists and he's laughing uncontrollably. Kevin frequently forgot when and where class was. On more than one occasion, I had to retrieve him from other classrooms. Kevin ate an entire 24-pack of crayons, puked, and then did it again the next day. This is 9th grade. I have no idea where he got crayons. Kevin's dad wrote tuition checks and mailed them to me, his English teacher. This was a public school. When I gave it back to Kevin, voided, to give to his dad with a brief note explaining that this is a public school, Kevin got in trouble for trying to spend it at 711 after school. Kevin was removed from the culinary arts program after leaving a cutting board on the gas stove and starting a fire, twice. Kevin threw his lunch at the school resource officer and tried to run away. He ran into a door and insisted it wasn't him. Kevin stole my phone during class. I called it. It rang. He denied that it was ringing. Not that it wasn't his, not that he did it. No, he denied that the phone was actually ringing. He tried it 3 times before the end of the year. Kevin called the basketball coach a motherfing B-word during gym. Basketball tryouts were that afternoon. Kevin tried out. It didn't go well. Kevin's mom could never remember which school he went to. She missed several meetings because she drove to other schools, none of which he ever went to. Kevin tased himself in the neck before a football game. Kevin kept a bottle of orange Kool-Aid in his backpack for about 4 months. He thought it would turn into alcohol. He drank it during homeroom and threw up. Kevin says the N-word a lot. Kevin was white. The high school was 84% black. Kevin got beat up a lot. Kevin stole another student's iPhone and tried to sell it back to them. Kevin didn't understand that his grade was dependent on tests, quizzes, homework, classwork, and participation. Kevin finished his first semester with a 3% average. He tried to bribe me with $11. Kevin spit on a girl and said you should get out of those wet clothes. The girl was the Spanish student teacher. Kevin didn't know dogs and cats were different animals. Kevin tried to download corn onto a computer in the library at the circulation desk while he was logged on. Kevin asked a girl to prom. He was in 9th grade and freshmen don't go to prom. by asking for her phone number and then texting her his address. Kevin got gum in his hair, constantly. Kevin regularly tried to cheat on assignments by knocking the pile over, grabbing one before I had picked them all up, and then writing its name on it wherever there was room. Kevin had several allergies, but neither his parents nor he could remember what they were. They were very concerned that the holiday party, it's high school, we don't have those, would have peanuts. When they finally got a doctor's note he was allergic to amoxicillin. Kevin and his parents took a trip to Nassau. How the female did they even get airline tickets? And forgot all their luggage at home. I didn't believe him when he told me until I talked to his mom, who told me the first thing when I saw her at the biweekly meeting. Kevin's grandfather apparently died in a chainsaw accident. I can only assume God was looking the other way that day.
My ex-husband's delirious girlfriend wants me to leave my home so they can move in. She cried when she learned that my ex doesn't have plans marrying after we broke up. My ex-husband and I have been divorced for almost 3 years now. While he did not want to get divorced, we separated and have been co-parenting our 2 preteens amicably. He lives within 5 blocks of our old home, and while we have 50-50 custody, our kids freely bounce between our places and choose how they want to spend holidays. We've tried hard to create a sense of stability despite the change in our family situation and have standing tune-up therapy twice a year to make sure we're all comfortable with the arrangements. Eventually, he had a partner named Maria, and I would say that she makes him happy. She has a very sweet and precocious son who is 9 years old that we all adore, and generally, I thought things were going well. I invited Maria to bring her son to my place if she would like him to join my kids in private language classes. She accepted, and this has been going on for a few weeks now. My kids adore her son. Last week, while she was helping me out and making snacks for the kids, she said something surprising. She asked me when I would be moving my thing out so that my ex and her could be able to cohabitate. I was taken aback and confused, asking her to clarify if she meant the home I am currently living in. I mean, this very home? And she nonchalantly told me, "You don't need all this space for 3 people." We wouldn't have enough space at my ex's current condo. We were in the living room by this time and her son heard everything. He looked so awful and embarrassed. My kids and I live in a brownstone that my ex and I purchased together 50-50, but that I have been renovating since before the divorce. My ex lives in a nice condo that's spacious but is still a little bit of a man cave. I really don't know how to react to that question, so I just changed the subject. Later in the evening, I got a text message from her son that was pleading for me to forgive his mom, that he's sorry for his mom and to not tell my ex. I feel awful, but I think I should let my ex know this conversation occurred and let him handle it. I called him that night about his partner's inquiry on the house and he seemed embarrassed about it as well. He said that he will talk to her to set all things straight. Next morning, I got a text from her son saying that they are not going to continue going here anymore because my ex and his partner had a big argument. It turns out that my ex had a vasectomy because he didn't want to marry or live with anyone anymore after our divorce.
Update: am I the jerk for not stopping my mill from wearing white? Given the way things turned out, it seemed fitting that I post this. I'm the previous poster's then fiancé. After Pia, not her real name, posted, a lot of commenters said I was wrong for not dealing with my mother myself, and I was especially wrong for getting mad at Pia without telling her anything. I didn't want to admit it, but the more comments I read, the harder it was to brush it off. I don't have a good relationship with my mother. She was the type to demand gifts on my birthday because I wouldn't be here without her. For 18 years, I never got to open presents myself. Looking back, every event, from my games to graduation, was always about her. I always felt like my life and achievements were just an extension of her accomplishments. I think I suppressed my resentment because everyone around me always acted like this was normal. I didn't know how to cope with this, so I just tried to get as far away from her as possible. I applied to furthest university I could realistically get in, and stayed far away because anytime I had to go back home, it was the same story. At university I was lucky enough to meet Pia, and for the first time I started to like who I was. I didn't feel like I had to hide or play down my accomplishments, or even my failures. And her family was so warm and welcoming. It felt like my childhood was just a nightmare of the past. I thought the best way to move past it was to just move ahead. I thought I would be able to handle it now as an independent adult. After all, everyone says you're supposed to let sleeping dogs lie. And in my worst moments, I felt jealous of my wonderful fiancé for having such a welcoming, loving family, even though they were treating me like one of their own. I was ashamed of my mother's behavior, and the ugliness of my resentment, so I pretended everything was fine, and invited my parents to my wedding. Until this post blew up, I don't think I really understood how important my wedding was to me. I mean, obviously, the whole getting married to the girl of my dreams is huge, but I mean the actual details of the whole ceremony. I actually had a really clear vision of what I wanted in the wedding, but a combination of my childhood trauma and the notion that wedding is the bride's day and not something men are supposed to care about made me unable to express it. I also didn't understand how badly I wanted an event that would be about me and not my mother. This unholy cocktail of repressed and suppressed feelings led to me unfairly lashing out at Pia when my mother tried her old tricks. At that moment I forgot white wasn't the bridal color in Indian weddings. I just felt a cold sweat that another precious moment would be hijacked by my mother. I think Pia was shocked by my outburst because she had never seen me like this, and made that post just to get some perspective. Neither of us imagined the ramifications it would have. I read every comment at least 10 times. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Unwanted memories kept invading my head, no matter how much I tried to bury my head in work or exhaust myself by exercising. I ended up having an actual meltdown that night. I was sobbing and crying, It was probably my ugliest moment. The next morning I half expected to wake up alone, and get a text that the wedding was off. Instead, incredibly, Pia stayed with me. She convinced me to go to therapy, encouraged me through those first few hellish sessions and gave me space when I needed it. Therapy really helped. I was able to understand why I was feeling angry and upset, and how to deal with it beyond just trying to ignore it. I apologized to Pia earlier, but it let me actually be honest with her about my family. It really transformed our relationship. I took over the wedding preparation, with the help of my in-laws. This turned out to be great for all of us. I got to actually design my dream wedding smile. My mill later told me she was really relieved that we switched because my lovely Pia didn't really care any which way about the colors or flowers and had virtually no input on any of it as long as we were getting married. You might have realized from her post that she is a pretty nonchalant and easygoing person. She used to joke that she was fine with just exchanging garlands and calling it a day. My mill was also very encouraging and patient in letting me voice my input, and even found things I didn't know but loved, like riding a horse to the ceremony. We have a running joke that I seem more like her son than Pia because our taste is so similar. And the actual wedding went really beautifully. Pia was ready to rescind my parents' invitations completely after everything, but her terrifying little sister suggested we invite anyway as a final sort of FU, to show them I wasn't alone anymore and no matter what they tried this time things would go my way. I have to admit that did appeal to me, so we decided to invite them for the third day of the ceremony, and it worked even better than I imagined. First, it helped that my mother had no real idea what an Indian wedding is like, so when she showed up in a long white tulle ball gown, security actually thought she had the wrong address and didn't let her in. This was actually something I didn't plan, but the schadenfreude of seeing my mother fuming by the gate while other guests were let in was delicious. Secondly, compare the embroidered silks and sleek satins of Indian clothes. My mother's ball gown honestly looked frumpy. Instead of stealing the show, she just looked like she didn't belong. This was accented by the jewelry, the matching churi and kungan and earring and bindis worn compared to her much more sparse look. Pia looked especially beautiful in her red langa choli, with intricate henna covering her hands and feet. I'm probably biased since she's my wife, but she has the most beautiful inky hair and it looks stunning adorned with gajra and gold billow on her braid. Indian brides also wear something called a mata patty which looks like a crown. It definitely made her look like a princess. I actually forgot about my parents, and my insecurity, and pretty much the rest of the universe because I couldn't stop staring at her. Then my mother tried really hard to interrupt the ceremony. First she tried coughing, but luckily Pia's aunt sitting next to her gave her a cough drop. Then she tried to initiate a conversation, but Pia's 5-year-old niece loudly said in that high-pitched voice of children that really projects, "Don't you know it's rude to talk during weddings?" I'm 5 and I know that. I later learned that she had been coached to respond this way by my wonderful, terrifying Sil. The third time she tried to interrupt Pia's cousin, who had also been coached by Sil, jumped and loudly whispered that the food didn't seem to agree with my mother and needed to go to the bathroom immediately. I'm sure you can guess the implication, and basically pushed her away. After that she stayed embarrassedly quiet for the rest of the ceremony. Throughout all this, the Panditji never missed a beat and everyone else acted like she wasn't there. In the after-party, the difference between my mother and everyone else was unpleasantly accented by her ignorance of Bollywood/Tollywood dance skills, so she tried to refocus attention through conversation. She turned to my mother-in-law and started to complain about how hard it was to raise me. My mill, bless her heart, said, "However difficult children are, they bring 10 times as much happiness just by growing. Your son is such a wonderful young man, you must be so proud of him." My mother didn't like the direction of the conversation, so she turned to Pia and asked her if she was sure she wanted to be with me. This was after we had gotten married. Pia looked at her like she was a bit slow and said, "Why would I be marrying him if I wasn't sure?" My mother loudly asked her again if she was really sure, because I used to wet the bed. I haven't done that since I was 8, but there she was, loudly announcing it for all and sundry. At that moment, I really hated her. It felt like there was something stuck in my throat, but no words came out. But Pia didn't have that problem. "You must be confused," she said, and it was so confident with a touch of concern that my mother looked like she was actually confused. Then she raised her voice so it could be heard over the music. "Dear, my mother, I know we are family now, but it's much too soon right now, or ever, for me to hear about your bedroom activities." Then she dragged me away to the dance floor while people started to stare at my mother. Stupidly, the first thing I said in our first dance as a married couple was that my mother was right. But because I am the luckiest man alive, Pia just squeezed my hand and told me it happens when children are put under stress and it wasn't my fault. That was pretty much the end of the problem, and I enjoyed the rest of my wedding dancing, eating food and talking with Pia, and now my wonderful family. I did see Pia and my Sil having another talk with my mother later, but I was too far away to hear anything. It couldn't have been too bad because my Sil smiled a lot, and my mother didn't try anything new for the rest of the party. By the end of the day, my mother looked incredibly constipated, but she hadn't managed to ruin anything. I felt so relieved when I said goodbye, like a weight had just slipped off my feet and my knees felt weak. It was the first time in my life that she hadn't taken over something that was supposed to be about me. After that day I haven't had any more sudden invasive memories of the past. I feel so incredibly lucky to have married this girl, and I feel like I might have done something really stupid after that fight, if I hadn't seen so many strangers telling me the same thing until I couldn't ignore it. So in case anyone was still following this, I wanted to post a thank you. Am I the jerk for kicking out my pregnant stepdaughter over my cat? So I, 35, have been with my 45 Fiancé for 3 years now. He has 2 kids, a daughter, 22, who's a lovely girl, another daughter, 19, who I'll call Kim for the sake of the post. Kim has always had a bad attitude to everyone, especially me. Now, before anyone assumes, my fiancé was already divorced his ex 2 years before we even met, and his ex is a nice person who I get along with very well, so there's no hate from her end either. Kim is 3 months pregnant and living with us because we have more room for her and the baby. The baby daddy stays sometimes, but he has 2 jobs along with studies, so it's mainly been me who's take care of her. So the main issue today, her boyfriend came over, so my fiancé suggested we let them have the house to themselves and go for a walk. About 2 hours later I came home and noticed my cat missing, who Kim hated and wanted me to get rid of. I asked her where he was. Kim said she ran out the door, which I knew was bullshit. Whiskey is an elderly cat who even wouldn't go out on the porch if I didn't bring him. So I checked the Ring camera, and as expected, Kim threw Whiskey out that ran her off. My fiancé tried saying Kim is pregnant, her hormones are all over the place and pregnancy brain messes with women, that he was going to bring up getting rid of Whiskey for the baby's sake anyway. I was in tears till I looked over at Kim with a smug, satisfied look on her face. I lost it. I got up in her face and screamed that she had 1 hour to find my cat or all her crap would be in the dumpster and I was done being her slave. She said she wasn't looking for my stupid cat and back off as she was pregnant. My fiancé told me to claim down and we'd look for the cat. I told him no, I would look for my cat, and when I got back his daughter better be gone, and if he has issues he could go too, because I was sick of dealing with his little b-word of daughter who everyone including her own parents and boyfriend avoids. I didn't wait for them to respond. I did hear her crying though. As you know, I found my cat. He was hiding in some bushes. It took 20 long minutes to find him. When I arrived home they were both in the living room. My fiancé said he wanted to talk, but first he said I owed Kim an apology. I told him F himself and she better start packing. She's at her boyfriend's family home as far as I know, and my fiancé is not talking to me. So my now ex-fiancé oldest daughter reached out to me to ask my side. I'll call her Kate. She's an animal lover like myself. Her father asked to stay with her for a few nights because he said I was having a breakdown over my cat. He basically made out the cat escaped and I went after P or Kim for not trying to catch him. Her condition. Kate is a very smart girl. She can see bull form a mile away, and obviously she knows her own sister, so she called Kim to ask her side. Kim was more honest. Basically her and her dad planned it as some of you suggested. The plan was for her baby daddy to take the cat out a road dump, but he wouldn't do it because in Kim's words he was a weakling, so they got in a fight about it, and Kim, thankfully being lazy, just kicked Whiskey out and ran him out of the yard. Kate told me the way Kim's talking about me and Whiskey, even if she doesn't move back she'd do something for revenge to Whiskey. So I've decided to listen to Kate, my friends, the vet, his assistant and everyone here, and I called off the wedding, which is in few weeks, and broke up with my ex-fiancé by text. I don't give a F if it's immature or cruel. I've told him I'll box up his stuff for him and leave it for him to collect in a few days. Don't worry about Whiskey. I told my ex call me when he's coming over, so he'll be locked in a room safe, and I'm calling a 24-hour locksmith next. The begging and bull promises have already started, but my mind's made up. I'm done being his ATM slave for him and his spoiled b-word of a daughter, Kim.
What's a work-related accident that still haunts you to this day? I work in a dealership, and once a tech was using a tool that broke free, bashing him in the face, knocking out multiple teeth, splitting his lip and breaking his nose. It was a bloody mess. Young kid, with balls of steel apparently. While waiting for an ambulance he was sitting there talking and smiled to show the damage. That smile was horrifying. He recovered and got a ton of dental work and still works there. While building Levi Stadium, a trucker was unloading rebar when the entire pile fell on him, impaling him multiple times and also crushing him. I never met the man, but his cat and elderly dog ended up a local shelter. We planned to adopt the dog and ended up taking home the cat too because we didn't want to split them. Nina, the dog, passed away in her sleep in 2017, about 2 years after we brought her home. Seal, the cat, is around 7 years old now and doing just fine. I've always wondered if they ever thought of him.
My wife emotionally abuses me because she's miserable with her own life. Her sister made me realize how unhappy I am, and I desperately want a divorce. My marriage has been horrible for me in the last year. My wife is always angry, negative, lazy, and blames everything that goes slightly wrong in her life on somebody else except herself. I'm a very outgoing and motivated person and like to go out a lot. My wife is less outgoing but used to always try to make an effort to go out together and have fun. For the past year she hasn't done anything in our marriage. She is addicted to her phone and barely pays attention when I'm talking or we are doing something. We barely go out anymore, and if we do she always finds something to get angry at, like a waiter taking a little too long. When we are out eating, she is on her phone watching TikToks and barely communicating with me. She always wakes up moody and angry and destroys the whole vibe. She curses in every other sentence she says and huffs and puffs if she has to do something that normal grown adults have too. We have also not been intimate for the past 6 months and it doesn't look like something is going to change. I always tell her how much I appreciate her and that I love her and try to do things together. For the past year I have tried to communicate to her that something needs to change in our marriage, but she just gets angry and avoids the conversation instead of talking. It has gotten to the point that I have stopped caring about our marriage and have just been going along and focusing on my personal life and goals. My wife's sister Elle has recently gotten out of a long-term relationship and has moved in with us temporarily. Elle is the complete opposite of my wife. She is happy, vibrant, talks and just fun to be around. Ever since she moved in, we have been spending a lot of time together because my wife doesn't do anything else other than watch Netflix and talk to her friends on FaceTime when she is home. On the rare occasions she is not doing one of these things, she is out with her friends. Elle is a very active person, so we do a lot of activities together. She joins me when I go to the park to get some fresh air, she helps me cook when I'm preparing dinner and even works out with me in my home gym. I always try to get my wife to tag along with us but she never does. Spending all this time with Elle has totally changed my mood. Being around a person that is positive and doesn't complain about every single thing in their life is so refreshing and fun. But don't get the wrong idea, we have never done anything inappropriate, we have just become really good friends that lift each other up. The past couple of months since Elle moved in have made me realize how unhappy I'm in my marriage. Having someone around you that is constantly complaining, cursing and angry drains every bit of energy you have. It's depressing and that's not how I want my life to be. I want to be with someone positive who shows that they care about me and want to have new experiences together with me. I have tried so hard for the past year to make my marriage work with my wife, but I just get shut down. I don't feel loved anymore and appreciated, and I don't want to be in this position anymore. I want a divorce so I can move on with my life and find someone who actually loves me and cares for me. I have officially checked out of my marriage and don't want to turn back anymore. I'm just not completely sure how I should go about the situation now. I know for a fact that I'm going to get trashed by friends and her family for leaving my wife and that I'm somehow going to come out as the bad guy. I want this process to be as clean as possible, but I'm not sure how. My wife emotionally abuses me because she's miserable with her own life. Her sister made me realize how unhappy I am and I desperately want a divorce. The past couple of days I have been able to clear my head about my marriage. I realize that this is not how I want to spend the rest of my life. I want to be with someone who cares about me and loves me. She clearly doesn't. I want to be with someone who respects me enough to put her phone down when we are having dinner and I'm trying to talk to her and isn't ignoring me to watch TikToks. I'm done trying and getting nothing in return. I am done giving it my all and getting nothing back. I have been trying to communicate and make things better for a whole year and have been completely neglected. I still have love for my wife but I'm not in love with her anymore. I want to move on with my life and find the right one for me and lead a happy life. I have already been in contact with my divorce attorney and I'm getting the process started. I turned 32 2 days ago and my wife didn't even acknowledge my existence. Instead, she went out with her friends that night. Even her sister remembered my birthday and got me a present. She was even shocked that my wife ignored my birthday like this. We ended up having dinner together at a restaurant and she even paid for the both of us. I didn't even feel the need to mention my birthday to my wife because I knew that at this point she didn't really care. This really made me lock my decision. I don't care if she is depressed or not, if she doesn't even care enough about me to remember and acknowledge my birthday and rather goes out with her friends, I don't want to be with her. People kept saying that we should go to counseling and therapy to patch things out. For the past year I've been trying to get my wife to couples therapy with me but she just refuses and gets angry with me as always. I have tried everything I could have thought of to make my marriage work but she pretty much shuts everything down I try. I've tried so hard to make my marriage work and put in so much effort, but now I've had enough of it. It seemed like she was living her own life without me and that she would get frustrated with everything I got involved in. I'm not going to say if she has or doesn't have depression, that's not for me to determine. Whether she has it or not, I don't find that a valid excuse to treat me the way she has been for the past year. She didn't even have the respect to communicate and talk to me like a decent human being instead of being on her phone or ignoring me. If she has depression, she'll have to figure that out on her own without me. I want a divorce so I can get myself out of this miserable marriage and so I can move on with my life. I'm getting this divorce for my own well-being. Elle finds the divorce unfortunate but she supports my decision. She even suggested that we stay friends after because we get along great. When I told her that I was divorcing her, some little bit in me hoped she would realize what has been happening in the past year and try to apologize and make things good again or something. Instead she started getting angry with me and started yelling at me. Just like always, she started blaming me instead of taking responsibility. At this point I stopped caring and didn't respond to all her yelling. I told her that my decision was final. I also suggested she see a medical professional to figure her possible depression out, but what she does with that advice is really none of my concern. Elle knew something was up and tried to talk with my wife about what was going on, but pretty much got dismissed and yelled at for getting her nose in our business. For now, I'll be sleeping on the couch and living my own life. Elle informed me that she is moving out and was able to find a place so I'll be taking the guest bedroom when she gets out. I'm in the middle of trying to figure things out with my lawyer and hopefully we will be able to move fast in this divorce. I'm mentally preparing myself for everything that will happen to me socially and I accept that. I just want this to be over so I can move on with my life.
I might be a sociopath and I'm hiding it from my boyfriend. So some context, I, 21 female, have been with my 20 male boyfriend for almost a year exactly and we're pretty happy with our relationship. Recently during a date a situation came up out of nowhere where his sister became very sick suddenly. She had to be rushed to the ER and hospitalized. He was obviously very stressed out and upset about it. I drove him to the hospital and he was on the verge of tears the whole time. The thing is, I felt nothing. I genuinely did not know how I should be acting at the time. I know I should have been comforting him and I tried my best, but none of it felt genuine. I realized I literally did not understand what he was feeling at the time and that kind of freaked me out. Looking back, I've been in quite a few situations that were very emotional for people I'm close with and I was never able to empathize with them. I've had family members die and been the only person at the funeral not upset. I felt completely out of place being around so many people clearly in distress over someone dying. I kind of just tend to copy people around me. When I was with my boyfriend and his sister was hospitalized, I had no one to copy. If I copied his reactions, it would have been unusual. So I reverted to all sorts of emotions. Hell, I even made jokes somehow thinking that was appropriate. My reactions to such events have always felt very fake and forced, like I'm putting on an act based on how I should be acting. I don't have a diagnosis because getting an appointment with a psychiatrist is impossible where I live unless you've been involuntarily committed to a mental institute. Otherwise, it's a year-long wait list for even an initial appointment. It is literally easier to get an appointment if I killed someone. This has bothered me for quite a while now. I don't feel normal, and it feels like revealing that would be a roadblock in our relationship. I think it would hurt him to know I don't feel the same levels of emotion as him, or that he'll feel that I'm just faking whatever I'm expressing, even if it is genuine. Worse yet, he might even feel threatened. Everyone's exposure to sociopaths/psychopaths seems to be serial killers and movies. I don't want him to think I might hurt him based on some stupid movie.
When did you first realize your child was different? 3 minutes after my daughter was born, my husband was talking to her from across the room as the doctor was fixing me up, and that baby lifted her head up off of the bassinet and found him. The nurse laughed a little and called her a daddy's girl. She did the same thing the next day as my mother was holding her. Her daddy said something and that little head popped right up. She held it upright for a good 25 to 30 seconds, just intently focused on him. It was absolutely amazing to see. My family couldn't believe it. At the age of 3 months, she very clearly said her first word, daddy. No data for this kid. By her first birthday, she was speaking in, mostly, clear sentences. By the age of 3, she had taught herself to read. We could go in a bookstore or library and she would grab a book we had never read and she would go to town with it. For her 5th birthday she asked for a dictionary, and then sat down and started reading it out loud, right in the middle of her party. In 1st grade they tested her at an 8th grade reading level. By 3rd they had stopped testing her reading, as she was by that point at a college level. Early gifted and talented admission in her school. We decided not to skip grades, though it was brought up, as she had a very close group of friends and we felt like social skills were equally important. Now, at 14, she has still never made below an A on anything. Always at the top of her class. Reads 1,000-page books in just 2 or 3 hours. Very well liked by both classmates and teachers. Her older brothers absolutely adore her, and she's still very much a daddy's girl, though she will tell anyone that her mama is her favorite person. She's something else. But then again, all kids are. No 2 children are the same. No 2 brains work the same way. All children are different. I have 3 kids, and each one has different likes and dislikes, wants and needs, strengths and weaknesses. They are all different, but they are all equally loved. Has a doctor or nurse ever accused you of lying? I had terrible acne as a teenager. When I was 18, I saw a dermatologist and was put on Accutane. It's an oral medication that's taken daily, and it can have several unpleasant side effects, including liver damage and severe birth defects. Because of this, they would take a blood sample every time I went in the office, to make sure my liver was functioning properly and that I wasn't pregnant. Yes, I was born and have remained a male all my life. They still tested for pregnancy for everyone who took that medication, I suppose as an example of Syoa taken to ridiculous levels. This isn't about that, for reasons I'd rather not get into. I was living about 35 miles away from the doctor's office, which was here in my hometown, Santa Clarita. On the 405 freeway, it was an hour or more on a good day. The doctor would refill my prescription every month, but no additional refills. I know now that they needed that blood test, but back then, it just seemed inconvenient to have to spend 2+ hours of driving, in addition to the visit itself, just to get my medication refilled. But after years of hating what I saw in the mirror, my complexion was finally improving, and my self-esteem incrementally as well. So one time, when I still had about a week's worth left of the meds, I just called the Rite Aid near me and said I needed a refill, and they gave it. So I canceled my upcoming appointment and saved myself the drive that month. The following month, I went to the appointment as scheduled. The doctor said my acne looked pretty good for not having had any Accutane for a whole month. What are you talking about? I had the prescription refilled down by my place. I didn't feel like driving all the way here and back just for a prescription. She got very suspicious. She said she didn't believe that. There's no way a pharmacy would refill this medication without a doctor's prescription. I said I didn't know what to tell her. I called them and they filled it. If they weren't supposed to do that, that's on them. I certainly didn't know that. I just didn't want to make the drive. Living in Greater LA and dealing with the traffic sucks, she wanted to know where I really got it. Like I drove to a dark street corner and ordered it with a balloon of heroin. Get real. I left, made an appointment with another dermatologist about a mile from where I was living, and had no problems with her. Certainly never got accused of buying black market Accutane.
My delusional father-in-law demands that we name our baby after him. He lost it when we gave my newborn son my father's name. I recently had twins with my husband Harry. I love my babies so much, but the labor was a nightmare. It was extremely traumatic for my husband and I, and we've agreed that we are definitely not having any more kids. I was laboring for 2 days, and throughout the process we kept our families updated. When they were finally able to visit, my parents and my in-laws came to see us. Everyone was fussing over the babies, and my poor husband, who only had about 4 hours of sleep for the whole 2 days, was napping. My dad, however, sat by me first and just held my hand for a bit. When I told him to go get some cuddles with the twins, he said, "I'm here to see my baby," meaning me. It was honestly so sweet, and I started tearing up. I didn't even realize how invisible I felt when my husband was sleeping and my dad was there to make sure I was also being taken care of. He took me down to the hospital cafe and we had breakfast together while the babies were with everyone else. I kept thinking about what my dad did for the next few days, and I decided that I would give my newborn son my father's name as his middle name. My husband was totally on board with this. However, this is where the problem began. We knew my father-in-law would be pretty pissed at this. He always wanted a grandson named after him, but it's pretty clear now he won't get one. He has 2 sons, my husband and his younger brother, and my brother-in-law is gay and currently says he doesn't want to adopt kids in the future. My father-in-law is also one of those people who cares about bloodline, so I don't think he'd want an adopted grandson named after him. My husband has a complicated relationship with his father, so he wasn't comfortable naming our son after him, but we agreed to give them the same initials so they'd both be AHD. He accepted this, but when he found out we were switching the middle name for my father, He lost his mind. He said that this was something he always wanted and we were throwing it in his face by giving the baby my father's name as his middle name. I tried to explain why, but he cut me off and said that it was absurd to expect someone to check on me when there were babies that had just been born and my father shouldn't be rewarded for ignoring his grandchildren. I tried to explain that it was more than just the moment because my dad has been my best friend for my whole life, but he didn't want to hear it. Mother-in-law is saying we are Oz for doing this because my dad doesn't care about any grandchildren being named after him, but father-in-law has always wanted it. According to her, we are taking something away from him just because my dad chose to do something unusual, which to them was ignoring the babies until he was satisfied with me being okay. He did not ignore the kids. He got plenty of cuddles in when we got back from breakfast. My dad is honored by our choice but thinks we shouldn't have done it because of what it means to father-in-law. Am I the a-hole?
Today I effed up by having intimacy in front of my boss. I dated this girl for roughly 2 years on and off in high school and we were abstinent for a large part of that. We had planned a way that we both wanted to lose our virginity several months in advance. It was going to be romantic. Her parents would be out of town on a rather rare occasion that didn't happen often. We'd get home from school, watch a movie or two and cook some pizza rolls. Then after our gourmet dinner, head back to her room and do that deed. I had my shift covered at work, so it was the perfect plan. Until it wasn't. I worked the worst possible first job, with long hours, short breaks and terrible managers. They refused to schedule 1 or 2 more people just in case someone couldn't make their shift. They also refused to cover any shifts that had been dropped. I understand, but it's just inconvenient to have to almost be on call just in case someone dropped your shift they told you they'd cover or someone got sick and you got randomly selected to go in because they wouldn't schedule an extra person just in case. So anyway, the person who had my shift covered got sick, so I had to go into work the day of our planned festivities. Fine, whatever, we'll just plan for another day, until I had the most brilliant, diabolical idea I may have ever come up with. Why don't we just do it on my lunch break in my car? What could go wrong with that? So we rescheduled and the day came and I took my break at about 1 p.m. She came and brought me lunch and we decided to get to work. We decided to take all of our clothes off because that made the most sense, and got to work. I applied the rubber and she climbed on top and it was about as awkward as you could expect in the backseat of a car. We kinda had a rhythm going but post-nut clarity was starting to set in before I finished. A foreshadowing clarity, if you will. About 3 seconds after I thought this probably wasn't the best idea, I heard the worst possible sound in the entire world, a knock on my window. I froze, and my body went into a state of deep panic and somehow forced out a nut right as I glanced up, sheepishly, into the eyes of my manager. I had next to no tin on my old truck and had actually considered getting some prior to this. Oh well. My general manager was actually the one that saw me while she was parking and got our second-in-command officer to go and get me. They put me on probation and laughed about it, telling me to find any one of a million other parking lots in the city. I took their advice and tried it somewhere else next time. We got busted by a cop.
What was your worst they can say is no event that ended worse than a no? Briefly had a job going door to door talking to people about solar power. Whole idea was we weren't selling anything, just giving information, so I wasn't worried about commission or anything. If someone wasn't interested, fine by me. Walked up to a house that looked super nice and normal, didn't have no solicitation signs or anything. Instead of just saying no, they literally pulled a gun on me, lol. Oh, this is a good one. I got a job offer after being out of work for months. I had questions about the usual, salary, time off, nothing major and not making demands, just asking. If they had said no to all of them, I'd have taken the job anyway. Their response? I'm sorry, but we are withdrawing the offer. What? Who does this? Asked my crush to dance in middle school, said he already had a dance partner, so I said okay, that's fine. And walked away. Only to look back at the sound of laughter and see him dancing with a chair. He decided to show me, in front of everyone, that I was less attractive than a chair, so that was great.
My boyfriend told me I ate too much during a beautiful vacation dinner. I am not overweight, so. For context, I used to have an eating disorder years ago. Used to starve myself until I was severely underweight. My boyfriend knows this, although the worst time was before we got together. We've been together for 3 years now, and for the past 2 years I've finally been able to enjoy my fear foods without judging myself all that much afterwards. For context, I'm 5 feet 5 inches and weigh 135 pounds. I've always been bottom heavy, so flat stomach but stronger legs and ass. I usually go to the gym once or twice a week and go bouldering about once a week as well. We both work and I'm struggling a bit with anxiety and depression, so quite proud of me for even managing to still stay active even a bit. My boyfriend on the other hand has always been really fit but mostly underweight. He weighs about the same as me and is 57. For about a year now he's been absolutely obsessed with fitness, like watching YouTube videos about how to train your muscles most effectively. It's pretty much all he talks about. I go to the gym all the time, etc. pp. He's recently started calorie counting as well to gain weight, which stresses me out a bit. I used to do that to lose weight and it triggers my former ET a little. I have told him this before and he tries not to talk about calories too much anymore, but it still comes up about once a day. Like, hey, this has X calories. Wow, that's a weight gainer or something. When we are eating something together. He also weighs himself religiously. We are on vacation together in France. /course. I try not to think too much about whether my diet on vacation is healthy or not. In the past I stressed out so much about everything and ended up unable to enjoy anything about the actual vacation. I was so focused on my weight anyways. Yesterday we were in the cutest little town, of course enjoying an absolutely beautiful sunset, really dreamy like in a movie, and then sat down to eat dinner in a cute little restaurant facing the port. Well, we sat down and my boyfriend just seemed really tense and kind of angry. It just felt really off since we had a good time, I thought. And we were sitting in one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, enjoying a good glass of red wine. I asked him what was weighing on his mind and his answer was, "You've been eating too much yesterday and lately in general." Mind you, we are on vacation. On the day he was referring to, I ate a quarterback with cream cheese and an egg for breakfast. We're camping for lunch. Like 100 grams of pasta with some pesto. And for dinner we went out and I had a pulled pork burger. Maybe a bit much, but hey, it's not every day you're of course. He said he was worried about me eventually letting go of myself if we ever have children. He said it's important to be attracted to your partner. I agreed, but said that attraction is more than just looks and there's always the possibility of an accident, disability, illness happening, making you unable to stay fit. If he wants me to. Also, I told him I think it's a bit absurd to visit one of the most beautiful places on earth and be so obsessed with what your partner eats that it stops you from enjoying a beautiful dinner with the view of the sea. He didn't back down the whole dinner and kept insisting I eat too much and eventually my metabolism wouldn't be as good anymore. He says since he is hard on, he applies that to me as well, that as we get older, he thinks I'll eventually not take as much care of myself anymore. And if we had children? I replied that if we were to ever have children, I might want to have someone by my side who supports me when my whole body changes and not someone who is being judgy about how my body looks now compared to then. Also, mind you, I haven't gained weight lately apart from muscle from working out. Also, somehow he said that he would be embarrassed, even as a woman, to not even be able to do even one pull-up. Can't do one and have been trying to get to one pull-up lately by incorporating that in some workouts. It only escalated from there and I had one of the worst dinners of my life trying to keep myself from crying the whole time and miserably failing. I told him I was disappointed in him being that shallow and he said that's just how he is and he is entitled to wanting to find his partner attractive. Sure, but also why are you on vacation with me? Spending your time worrying about whether I might gain weight or not in 5 to 10 years? I honestly just think that was crossing my boundaries a lot. I can eat whatever I want. I'm not in any kind of way overweight. And also we are on vacation. I can't imagine spending it obsessing over how much my boyfriend ate yesterday. We have tried to make up and he has since apologized, but I am just so baffled and really ashamed and embarrassed to eat anything in front of him since. Trying to enjoy the rest of the vacation, but honestly I'm just really sad. My brother named his daughter after an antidepressant, and my family is mad at me. My brother and his girlfriend had a baby girl 2 months ago. I didn't visit her in the hospital due to the restrictions in place during the pandemic, but I quickly found out that they named her Celexa. My first reaction was to laugh. It sounded like a Pokemon name and not a human one. Still, it didn't seem too bad, and I just congratulated them through text like everyone else in my family. Still, I hadn't heard of anyone else with that name before, so I searched it up to see where it came from. One Google search told me that it is the name of an antidepressant medication. I was stunned. My brother works in the pharmaceutical industry, and I didn't know how he could possibly think that was a good name for his daughter. I don't understand the thought process behind it and I haven't tried to pry into it, but I really cannot stand it and I laugh whenever someone in my family refers to her. I've decided to just call her Lexa, and have referred to her as such for the last 2 months. Finally, one day, my brother's girlfriend asked me why I never call her Celexa, and I told her the truth, that it's the name of an antidepressant medication and it's a stupid name for a human being. This almost made her cry, because apparently she had been the one who suggested the name because she saw the word online, thought it was beautiful, and didn't do any research into what it was. Now apparently I've got her upset because she's worried that people are gonna bully their daughter for being named after a medication. Nobody in my family seems to be on my side, so now I'm wondering if it was a mistake to point it out. What's the brokest thing you've ever done? This was when I was stretched thin financially. Eating 3 meals a day was a rarity and even twice a day felt like a luxury. My job at a small truck stop barely covered my expenses, so ramen became a staple for my lunch. I would look through the garbage to find cans and bottles to take to the recycling center. Some days it was 1 or 2 cans. Most of the time, it was only a couple dollars worth. The truck stop had some hot food, hot dogs, pizza, sometimes taquitos or corn dogs. We got 1 bottle of water and 1 hot food item when we worked. The 4 to 11 p.m. shift was responsible for cleaning that. When I worked that shift, I'd normally grab a hot dog and a vitamin water at 5 for my free food and water. By 8 or 9 when they cleaned the machines and utensils and shit, it was usually only a few pieces of pizza left that had been sitting all day. My brokest thing was that I would take the pizza and eat just the cheese and toppings because the crust was a rock. Those were the good days.
What's the most effed up shit you've walked into? Heard a bang in my kitchen and walked in to find that my roommate slipped and cracked his head open. So much effing blood. He was out cold. He's fine though, a few staples and he was just as dumb as before, so no biggie. When I was young I was at my grandparents' ranch. My grandmom told me to go out and help my granddad. He was in the barn with a cow birth and had been there a while. I walked out to the completely quiet barn to see him looking down in either disgust or sadness. I walked around to see the most disgusting thing. The baby was already dead inside the mom and had ruptured during the birthing process. This caused massive shock and prolapse of the cow. I saw a lot of blood, a smell I will never forget, and the decaying face of a baby cow never born. I was maybe 12, and my mom had just given her cat a bath, possibly with dish soap or human shampoo. Whatever it was, we walked out of the kitchen where the cat was, and when I came back, the cat was convulsing on the floor, bleeding from the eyes. Kinda scarring. I never bathe my cat unless every aspect is a pet product. No shortcuts.
What excuse did your partner give you after you caught them cheating? I had caught him texting with girls before, so the trust was pretty much gone. Sometime after, I had a feeling that something was off about him, so I took his phone when he went to the bathroom and checked his recent messages. First conversation was with a random girl he met online, texting, sending nudes, discussing when they were going to meet up. And within 3 minutes I found tons of similar conversations, one of them with my best friend. Yelled at him, cried, kicked him out. His response? It was just a test. Those girls are only friends, I wanted to see if you trusted me enough not to check my phone, those convos are all fake. Needless to say, I didn't believe him. After he realized I wasn't going to believe him, he told me it was my fault because I was an annoying girlfriend. Yelled, well then you must be happy that I'm dumping you. And closed the door. The time I effed up by playing with my Tinder date's cat. Throwaway account because this is really embarrassing. This actually happened today, about 30 minutes ago. So I went on a Tinder date with this girl last night, it was great, she's really pretty and we had a great time. We came back to her place as it was close by and ended up doing the deed multiple times and ended up in bed. Now I haven't had much action in a while and it really tired me out, so I slept like a rock. Fast forward to about half an hour ago and I wake up butt bare, alone in her bed, but I can hear her downstairs in the kitchen. So I'm tossing and turning for a bit when all of a sudden this gorgeous gray floofy kitty comes and hops on the bed and starts purring like mad. I happily oblige and pet the shite out of it. I love cats. I didn't have the covers on me as it was hot and this cat felt so soft, flopping itself against my skin. So the cat starts getting playful, hopping over my body from one side to the next, and I'm rolling side to side tickling its belly in between, but when I roll over next, my schlong flips over with me, sailing through the air in a perfect arch. Just before it slapped my belly the cat pounced straight onto it and dug 2 paws in, one on the shaft and one on the head, much like last night. I effing screamed in agony, sat up and started trying to pull its claws out my sausage. The one on my head came off straight away but there was a claw still hanging on for dear life about halfway down which was fully lodged. The cat started to panic because it was stuck. I heard my date running upstairs and as she came in I was sat up with her cat buried in my crotch holding onto its leg trying to free it. I whimpered "Caca stuck, help," and she burst out laughing but reached over and unhooked the last claw out my shaft, leaving me bare and embarrassed. I waddled over to the bathroom with blood trickling down onto my ballsack and sat on the toilet dabbing the little holes with tissue. I'm still sat here now, with tissue pressed against my member as it write this. Going to have a shower I think. My lazy wife packed everything without saying a word to me so I forced her to talk. Now I'm being told I'm going to jail. I've been with my girlfriend for 8 years. She always turned down my proposal saying she wasn't ready and said when she did, she wanted to keep her own last name which I'm very against. She refused to have children with me and would only give me gawk 9,000 if I did it to her, which I don't like doing so we pretty much had a dead bedroom because she said I was lazy and non-engaging which, look I'm a wham bam, thank you ma'am kinda guy I don't like dragging it out. Girls I dated in the past could get off quick so I don't get why she wants to drag it out. I also think our division of labor was pretty fair and I left the cleaning and cooking to her because when I did it it wasn't to her standards so I said fine she can do it then. I do the other stuff but even sometimes that isn't good enough for her. I know we weren't perfect but no relationship is. And I did love her despite how hard-headed and stubborn she was. Today she was out with her friend and she was an hour late. I started calling her and texting her because admittedly I was hangry and had a hard day at work so I just wanted to eat and I didn't want to make a snack because then it would spoil my appetite for dinner. I see a U-Haul truck park across the street and I think nothing of it but then my girlfriend walks in with some suitcases I've never seen and starts packing everything that belongs to her. She didn't acknowledge me when I asked what she was doing. She went into our bedroom and grabbed all her clothes, her laptop, literally everything of hers. I kept asking her to please talk to me but she acted like I wasn't even there. I started yelling at her, getting in her way, even grabbing and shaking her to just talk to me. Holy crap, I know you can hear me, and she just looked away from me not saying anything. I grew angry and I pushed her to the floor and, still nothing. It was almost scary how she just acted like I literally wasn't there. And then she was just gone. And now to make it worse her brother messaged me saying girlfriend has evidence of me abusing her just because I had a normal human reaction of someone I loved acting like I don't exist. Am I the a-hole for how I reacted? Surely anyone would react the way I did if someone literally acted like they didn't hear you when you shake them? Apparently she had a hidden camera on her and I feel sick to my stomach that she set me up like that. Flight attendants and commercial pilots of Reddit, what's the most obnoxious thing someone has ever done on one of your flights? My husband travels all the time and he just told me this story on his most recent trip back to Hawaii. While he's waiting to board the plane, he's noticing a distinct smell of body odor. He's doing the whole wait, shit, is that me? Panic, trying to surreptitiously sniff his own armpits, when he notices that a bunch of the other people waiting are all doing the exact same thing. Figuring that it's either someone else, or that there is, like, a stockpile of raw onions nearby, he stops thinking about it. Until they board. Because of all his Delta miles, he's in first class, in the aisle seat. He sits down, and pulls out a book. The window seat next to him is empty, and stays that way for a while, so he's thinking, cool, empty row. Then, just as boarding is finishing, suddenly, this horrible, pungent smell just fills the cabin. It's so bad that he said literally every passenger in first class reacted, snapping their heads up to see what in the smelly hell just walked on the plane. It was a youngish woman, probably late 20s, early 30s. Very hippie chick style, wearing sort of a flow white top over a tank top. And she smelled like she had not bathed in days. Seriously, best guess is that she'd spent a week at a sweat lodge, and hadn't cleaned herself since. And, of course, she plopped herself down right next to my husband. Now, like I said, he's a seasoned traveler, so he's used to a lot, and his tolerance is pretty effing high, but he said this woman's smell was so bad that his eyes immediately started watering. The flight attendant came over, and the woman ordered a Mai Tai, then she pulled out a book, and started highlighting passages. Meanwhile, call buttons are beginning to light up like crazy, with pretty much every other passenger on the plane being all, oh, hell no about being stuck in a metal box from Hawaii to LA with someone who smells like she effed every member of Fish back in 2006, and vowed to never bathe again. Anyway, over the next 15 minutes while this woman sits there reading obliviously, my husband watches as the poor flight attendants have multiple whispered, nervous conversations at the front of the plane, all the while staring at this smelly lady. My husband is alternating between texting me in horror and making eye contact with the attendants, and he's doing the wide eyes of terror at them, and they're nodding at him and wide-eyeing right back. By this time, my husband is nervous that he's going to get a migraine because the smell is so overwhelming, and people nearby are wrapping shirts around their faces to combat the odor. Finally, the gate agent approaches. She asks the woman to follow her to the front, where apparently, they gave her some soap and a new shirt, and sent her into the bathroom. A few minutes later, she emerged wearing a new shirt, but still smelling atrocious. They gave her soap, but no instructions. My husband texts miserably. Can't they see she doesn't know what to do with it? Soap is hard for her. She sits back down, and promptly orders another drink. Another few minutes pass, with more wide-eyed silent help me face from my husband, as well as increasingly not so silent complaints from other passengers nearby, until finally, it becomes apparent that if action isn't taken, there's going to be a big ol' mutiny in the first class of a Delta plane. At this point, two agents approach the row. Now, this lady had the window seat and my husband was in the aisle, so this entire conversation had to take place with him awkwardly in the middle, pressing himself against his seat back, but the agents lean in and tell the woman that, sorry, she just can't ride on the plane, she smells too bad, and she's not fit to fly. She's incredulous, and keeps saying, just because you think I smell? And this sounds like a lawsuit to me. Meanwhile, the agents are being as friendly as they can be, explaining that they will happily put her up in a hotel for the night so she can take a shower, but that they can't allow her to board another Delta plane until she's cleaned herself off. She didn't make that much of a scene, and they all gathered her things and walked off together. The best part, though, was that right before she stood up, she complained that she had an important meeting back in LA, and absolutely had to fly out that afternoon. In response, one of the attendants smiled and brightly said, well, we can't help you, but I think there's still room on a United flight. My husband said it was one of the most surreal travel experiences ever. I cheated on my wife and she found out in a mental facility. My wife and I have been married for a little over 2 years. She has depression, type 1 diabetes, self-diagnosed autism, severe anxiety, survived multiple suicide attempts and is in and out of the mental hospital. I think it's bipolar or early schizo as she has family history of both illnesses. I care for her deeply, she is my best friend and she would never do anything to hurt me on purpose. From everything that's been happening, I have developed depression that I just now started getting out of. A little over a year ago I started feeling alone and unloved. I kept these feelings to myself as I felt that saying anything would only upset my wife and possibly make her condition worse. A little over 3 months ago I couldn't keep it to myself anymore and started asking my wife for couples counseling. After asking over and over again she finally lost her patience with me and told me she doesn't need it and if I need counseling I should start solo therapy. Something broke in me and I started planning how to get an amicable divorce in a way that would be the best given our situation. I started looking for friends online. I don't have any friends, even my family didn't know about anything until recently, that I could share my situation and ask for opinion. One of them was a girl from Florida who made me realize how toxic our relationship truly was. I then tried to rebound with her, telling her how sure I am about the divorce, that she is cute, and jokingly saying that we will have to go out for food once everything is over. After contacting a lawyer I learned that my wife would have to go back to USA after signing the papers. We live in Europe. Impossible for her as she has problems with her family, doesn't talk to them at all, meaning that I would have to throw her out on the streets. Here she has healthcare, financial stability, somewhat as I just finished university and I am just starting my career, and hopefully education opportunity. I quickly came to a conclusion by myself that I cannot leave her for those reasons until at least she gets diagnosed and educated. She has high school diploma and is legit one of the smartest people I know. I told the girl that I couldn't talk to her anymore given the situation but still felt unhappy and alone so I sent her messages from time to time giving updates on my life. I decided to try harder to help my wife and try to fight for our marriage. I gave myself until she gets medicated and diagnosed with whatever she has to see if there's anything left for us. And then I was going to tell her I only want to be her roommate until she finishes college herself, if I was still sure. While she is in mental hospital again after trying to unalive herself after a fight with me, I wouldn't leave the bathroom after I locked myself in from stress when she wanted me to leave our apartment. This time she logged into my Reddit and saw the last message I sent to the girl. It obviously shattered her. She doesn't want to see me right now, which I understand, but I am worried as she has no one there.
I called my idiot stepdad a child lover and now he's pissed. Am I the a-hole for calling out my stepdad for being a hypocrite at my sister's birthday dinner? I am my mom's oldest child. She met my stepdad when she was 19 and he was 27. They were married a year later and went on to have my siblings Nathan, Alyssa, and Teddy. It's not a secret that I don't like my stepdad. My mom was a vulnerable teenager when she met him and he was a grown man. He made her quit school and become a housewife, all while isolating her from her family. I left at 18 because I couldn't stand seeing him with her. I hate how he talks to her, and how he's treated her their entire relationship. I visit when he's working so I don't have to see him but still get to see my family, so the dislike I have for him is obvious. My sister Teddy had a birthday dinner a few days ago, and she really wanted me and my girlfriend to be there. So despite my dislike for my stepdad, I went because I want my little sister to be happy. At the dinner, somehow the fact that my girlfriend is 24 was mentioned, and my stepdad made a face before asking her, "You don't think it's inappropriate to date someone who can hardly legally drink?" I think all the years of quiet resentment just bubbled over because I didn't even think about it before I asked him if he developed those morals before or after he started dating a vulnerable teen mom when he was nearly 30. He got really red in the face and my mom very quickly changed the subject. The next morning, I got a text from my mom saying that my stepdad doesn't want me coming over to the house anymore, even when he isn't there. Apparently he made that announcement to my siblings too, and since then, both of my sisters have started giving him the silent treatment. My brother texted saying he agrees with me, and he wishes our mom would leave his dad too, but I shouldn't have done that at T's birthday dinner. My girlfriend agrees with my brother, but I talked to Teddy and as far as she's concerned, nothing I said was inaccurate and she thinks her dad should have kept his mouth shut if he didn't want me calling him out. The whole extended family found out about it though, so now my stepdad's mom is accusing me of lashing out at him because my mother never married my father, so they think I'm just jealous apparently. The whole thing is an absolute mess and I'm being called a jerk for ruining my sister's birthday dinner. So am I?
I fucked up and flashed my booze to my favorite teacher. I fucked up so bad and I'm ready to start my life across the world with a new identity. My dad works IT at my high school. I am a third-year college student now. A lot of the IT people and teachers are in this hangout music social club thing, including one of my favorite teachers from high school. Horrifying, I know. Due to the current lockdown, they have moved their meetings online through video calls. Here is where the screw-up begins. To join these calls, my dad uses the family computer in the living room. For reference, my room is adjacent to the living room and if my door is open I can directly see the computer from my doorway. Last night I was hanging out in my room wearing headphones and watching some Netflix while playing Animal Crossing. What else is there to do in the literal apocalypse? As I am playing I spilled a whole bowl of salsa on my white shirt, meaning if I want to salvage the shirt I have to soak it immediately, so I get off my bed and take off my shirt, and as this is quarantine I am not wearing a bra. I took off my shirt before I left my room because the whole bowl of salsa was literally on me, and the laundry room was right next to my room anyway. Here is where the screw up begins. The stars must have lined up for this to happen because I did not know my dad was attending this video conference. My dad had left the living room to go to the bathroom, and I am in clear view of the video camera on the family computer in the living room. So, I leave my room wearing absolutely nothing on the top, and all in walk to the laundry room to get the stain out of my shirt. Done easy, no problem. As I walk back to my room I get a craving for some soda and decide to go get one. The kitchen is adjacent to the living room, right next to the family computer. I walk by the computer and into the kitchen, open the fridge, and behind me I hear op, and I immediately recognize my teacher's voice. I stop dead in my tracks. You know that feeling when your stomach drops and your entire body just freezes? That. In my panic, I was so shocked and I was just putting two and two together and just go no and drop to the floor, and sit on the floor, my back against the kitchen island with my knees to my chest, and I have no idea what to. There is no way I can get back into my room without going past the camera. Luckily my dad came to the rescue and came back to the room shortly after, and this was the conversation that followed. Teacher, hey, I believe your daughter might be in hiding. You might want to hang up so she can safely return to her room. Dad, op, you there? He can't see me because I'm behind the kitchen island. Me, yes. Dad, do I want to know? Me, no. Dad, should I disconnect from the call? Me, yes. Can you also close your eyes until I tell you to open them? Dad, very confused at this point. Okay. My dad proceeds to turn off his camera and tells me I can leave. I then fled the scene, locked my door, and immediately put on a shirt. I called out to my dad that it was safe, and a few minutes later I could hear him laugh with everyone on the call. We have yet to discuss this. If I found a bag full of millions of dollars on the sidewalk, what would the US tax system do? Is it tax fraud? Do I have to give it to the government? There are countless ways to be caught if you do this. Most commonly, however, either somebody you buy from gets audited/inspected or something you do happens to fall under what they are looking for that year. If you buy a car, flight, or television, there is typically a paper trail. A car, in particular, has to be registered. If you do renovations, your construction site can get inspected and the people doing your renovations can have their permits checked as well as their books audited. If somebody you have been dealing with has been accepting a lot of cash, the IRS will check some percentage of their customers in order to find out where that cash is coming from. Similarly, if the IRS realizes that a lot of people have been hiding cash by, for example, buying expensive used cars, they may decide to audit some percentage of the people who registered luxury cars at suspiciously low sale values. Lots of people have undeclared cash and lots of people successfully hide it, but the relevant tax authorities are constantly catching some of those people, so be careful. A female student calls me daddy in class. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and try to not think of grappling as intimate, so this is really bugging me. This girl happens to be quite attractive to me and it is causing conflicting thoughts in my head. Every time we have to grapple, she calls me daddy and winks at me when I pin her. I don't want to be the guy that gets a stiffy while rolling with the females. I don't want to make those mental links. We always got along and recently she and I became good friends. We walk together every session we see each other to the station. She sometimes will wait for me to finish showering up to talk. I didn't mind at all as I said previously I find her attractive but that's beside the point. I'm not innocent and the flirting hasn't been one-sided. She did it once a while ago whilst we were rolling but I thought I must have misheard and thought nothing of it. I don't want to make a mental link between BJJ and intimacy because that would ruin it for me. She did it again yesterday at our open mat session. She went out of her way to find me and to partner up. I didn't want to seem misogynist so I went along with it. We were rolling for a minute or two when she recovered her guard and then said to me how you like that whilst smiling. I immediately thought it was just trash talk and I come from a basketball background so I'm used to it. I ignored it. I passed her guard and had her close to back mount with one hook in. That's when she said it again and this time I heard it clearly. She looked back at me and said you can take my back anytime daddy. I at first told myself it's just trash talk again, but the way she flirts with me outside of rolling makes me think it's more than that. I don't know what to do. Should I avoid her or tell the coach? Am I the a-hole for not paying my spoiled wife's bills? So I am married to the love of my life. We have 2 sweet kids, ages 5 and 9, and we all live in a house in a nice small typical Scandinavian town. Our economy is mostly shared, more on this in a bit. I'm an engineer working as a consultant. There's great pay and benefits and I make more than I spend. My wife has a master's degree in human communication, a horribly useless degree, even according to herself. Since graduating something like 8 years ago, she has been unable to find a job in her field. Here is the thing. My wife has very wealthy parents. Thanks to them, her share of our house was gifted to her though I still pay the mortgage on my share. They gifted her a brand new car, but I drive my own. Each Christmas, they give her $20,000, her, not me. Besides that yearly gift, she has more or less been without income for most of her adult life, including when she attended university. She did hold a few odd jobs here and there. We share all family-related expenses through a shared account, 50-50. Besides that, we have our own accounts. But many purchases go toward the family or house anyway, so it's not like airtight. You know how it is. My wife recently got a part-time job in a clothing store. The pay is terrible, the hours are weird and she doesn't get along with the owner. Therefore, she is considering quitting. I'm telling her to go ahead, but also that even a bad job pays better than no job. In my opinion, she is a little picky with jobs. She won't do cleaning, elderly care and other stuff like that, despite those being jobs she is able to get without any qualifications. She keeps applying for jobs in her own field, but so far without any luck besides a couple of first-round interviews. The market is very limited. Because of the increased cost of living, her yearly gift and small paycheck doesn't quite cut it anymore. She tells me that she is barely making ends meet. Therefore, she has asked me to help her out by paying a larger share of our shared expenses. I basically said no. I told her that not many people are as privileged as her and that she really should be less picky, or even consider requalification. I felt bad telling her, but also needed to be honest with her. I could help her out, but that just doesn't sit right with me, all things considered.
I found tickets for a cruise that my boyfriend got me. This gift has cemented for me that this relationship is over. I need to let this out without getting pushback from family and friends who think his gift is romantic. My birthday is coming up in a few months and 3 days ago, I found out what my birthday present was, which are tickets to a cruise. His sister spilled the news thinking I would be excited and I'm not. We live together and I found the gift and know it's for me. I sound so ungrateful but I'm not. This gift just proves to me that things will never change. The first thing is this gift isn't for me. I do not like cruises because I get really bad seasickness and nothing I do helps. I also told him what I wanted to do for my birthday, which was go to a Ren Fair festival. I have already taken the week off from work for it in preparation to go to this fair. I have purchased tickets and I'm saving months to months so that I have spending money without it affecting finances at home. Why would he book tickets the same time at the time I took off to go to this festival? Also, this cruise wasn't cheap at all, so it's basically wasted money because I'm not going. I'm so annoyed. I have told him time and time again that I don't feel like he listens to me, that I feel like he just gets me things by thinking about what's best for him or what he would like. It's not only gifts. He makes decisions based on what he thinks is best and I just can't deal with it anymore. I love him but I'm so done, and before anyone says I didn't talk to him or to talk to him about this, I have repeatedly. This has been a recurring conversation in our 2.5-year relationship. The next thing to do is talk this out and end things. Update number 1, the day I wrote my post is the day I ended things with my ex. When he came home, I basically said I found the tickets for the cruise and I asked him who they were for. He said they were for me for my birthday and I ruined the surprise. I asked him why did he get me tickets for a cruise when he knows that I get seasick and also when he knows that I have been preparing for a Ren Fair festival for a couple of months. He said that he always liked cruises when he went on them and he thought that I could push through it with patches or some other remedy, because it was a really expensive cruise. He continued talking, but to be honest, I spaced out because I realized just how much this man didn't care about me. He bought cruise tickets completely disregarding what I had planned, how I would feel, and what I wanted to do, all because he liked them. Like, screw my birthday, screw what I want, screw how sick I get. He likes cruises, so we should do that. I think he realized I wasn't speaking or excited because he asked me what was wrong and I broke up with him. He was shocked and angry and he asked why. This isn't the exact wording, but I said something like, "It's because I have realized how much you really don't care about me, and that you are always willing to put your wants over mine every time it suits you, even on my birthday." He started to argue and wanted to talk about it, but I was just numb and went to bed on the couch. After 2 hours of trying to speak to me, he left me alone. I woke up the next day and got ready for work. I oddly felt fine and he wanted to talk, but I just said I'm done. If he wanted to talk about the apartment, or what we would do about the lease, or anything regarding the end of the relationship, I'm okay with that. I told him I'm not changing my mind about this, and for me, this relationship is done and I just want to split amicably. While I was at work that day, I had free time and I wrote down every instance I could remember just in the last 6 months of him choosing his wants and needs over mine. It was nearly 3 pages front to back, and I didn't even realize how much I let go off because he didn't want to do it. When I went home and he tried to talk again, I gave him the list and I explained what it was. He left me alone the rest of the second night. He's still not accepting the breakup. He wants to do couples therapy now, or even go on a break because he realizes how much he has done, but nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not trying to be mean or harsh to him, but I don't want to give him false hope. I also feel weirdly okay but also numb at the same time. What I have to deal with now is breaking the lease, which he isn't willing to do because he thinks we can move past this. So I'm going to talk to the leasing office and see my options. At least I have my birthday to look forward to as I deal with a relationship ending and having to find a new place to live. Update number 2, so I don't even know what to say about the past 2 weeks since I last posted. I had hoped to do a real quick update saying I was good, out of the lease, found a place, but I can't say that. First, the leasing office offered me a way out of the place and it's really expensive. We have 4 months left and there is no way I could afford to break this lease, find a new place, move, put down a deposit and everything else that comes along with moving. If my ex and I break the lease together, it is significantly cheaper, but he has refused, so I have no choice but to live with him. I have a few places in mind and I'm eligible, so I will just deal with this for now. I moved all of my things to a storage unit and put all my important documents into a safe location elsewhere. I have to get furniture for my new place since it was his place I moved into, but other than that, I already have everything else you would need. When it comes to my ex, I don't even know how to describe what is happening. It honestly feels like these last 17 days have been happening to someone else. He won't let me out of the lease because he thinks we can fix this. First, he tried to gaslight me because he said the things on the list didn't happen. Jerk, where do you think I got an accurate recollection of what you did in the dates and text messages? When I told him that the text showed him either confirming what I said, doing the opposite, and then apologizing, his face dropped. You can lie all you want, but I literally have evidence to back up my memory. Then this brilliant idiot decided, you know what, I'm going to look at the list and pick things I did wrong and do them right. So he started picking things he had done wrong and then doing it right without any input from me. You know, it's the biggest brain bash to realize that he could have done this right from the start. None of these were mistakes. He knew exactly what he was doing and didn't care about what I wanted or needed if he thought his idea was better. I had people message me asking what was on the list, and you know what, when I find the time, I will rewrite the whole list with screenshots. I will give a few examples now. One was when I asked him to pick up an orchid for me since I would be working late all week. Orchids were my grandmother's favorite flower and she died a couple of years ago. Sometimes I really miss her, so I get some of her favorite flowers and having them around really helps my mood. He decided to pick up roses and I remember seeing the roses and saying, "Why did you get me roses when I asked for an orchid?" and him saying that he thought these were better and prettier. Another example was when he took my car to a different mechanic because he thought the one I had used for 5 years was trying to scam me when he literally was going to patch up 2 tires that happened to get a nail. Did he even meet my mechanic? No, he didn't. He just decided to take my car somewhere else. I took my car to my mechanic who charged me $20 to fix my 2 tires, and he's literally my friend. The last was when I was invited to a party that had an ex-friend invited who had tried to essay another friend of mine. I told my BF, "You can go, but I'm not going out of solidarity with my friend if that guy is going to be there." He promised that he had heard from the planner that the guy had said no to coming. He lied, and my friend and I were shocked to see the guy there. I almost lost my friendship with my friend because my ex thought that we shouldn't miss out on a party because he could prevent the guy from approaching us. My ex would do things like this all the time, and each time I would be livid because he promised to do something for me, and then would veto my decision to go for what he felt was best before discussing it with me. I take full responsibility for enabling this behavior, but I honestly thought at the time that I was compromising, and he fully took advantage of that. At the time I thought, wow, yeah, he's not doing what I wanted, but he's still doing these things, and it's misguided, but he's trying. I did go to my close friends and sister event, and I would hear, "Oh, but at least he still got you flowers. I can't remember the last time I got roses. He was looking out for you." Some mechanics are leeches. He was trying to be a protector when he lied about the party. I realize now that these responses made me feel bad and helped me accept the behavior because when I vented to my friends and sister, I got feedback that made it seem like I was ungrateful and that he was a boyfriend who made mistakes, but at least he tried. I also didn't realize the sheer amount of bull crap I put up with. Writing it down and seeing the list get longer and longer when you have barely scratched the surface, you're like, how did I get here? How did I let so many things slide? Where the heck did my backbone go? I will say the backbone is back and I'm not tolerating any of this. Anytime my ex tries to talk to me about things not regarding the lease, I tell him to push through it. Your feelings are hurt, push through it. You still love me, push through it. You're in pain, push through it. You did something nice for me but I'm ignoring it, push through it. You paid for couples counseling and I didn't show up, push through it. I don't give a crap. He keeps asking why I'm fine and honestly I think a part of me checked out a long time ago, grieved this relationship and that part was waiting for the rest of me to catch up and I have. As for my friends and family, I have told them the relationship is done and that's my decision and that it's none of their business. When a few of them tried to make me feel bad about the cruise and how they wish someone would do that for them, I told them that their husbands and boyfriends not even doing the bare minimum for them doesn't mean that I should accept my ex's crappy behavior. I told them that maybe they should concentrate on why their significant do nothing for them instead of trying to get me to accept things I don't want or need just because my ex happened to try. Not going to lie, that response took me a couple of hours to articulate and some of them aren't talking to me now but oh well. So that's my life currently. I'm living in the guest room and my ex is still trying. He's very annoyed and hurt but that's not my problem. He is basically holding me hostage so I don't care about his feelings. I have made it clear we are roommates. I don't cook, clean, or do anything for him. Honestly, I barely speak to him and I ignore his calls and texts when not at home. If he won't let me out of the lease, I will treat him like a stranger. I will not harm him or destroy any of his things but I'm going to actively ignore his entire existence for the next 4 months. Either he deals with this or he lets me out of the lease. Other than that, I'm doing really good and working on myself and maintaining boundaries and not letting people take advantage anymore.
My wife kicked me out after finding my secret Reddit account. Hello all, for the first time posing under a throwaway and on mobile. I went to work happily today and I happened to have a pregnant coworker there. We get along but we aren't close or anything. When I came home, I was totally expecting a normal day. However, today when I came home from work to my pregnant wife, of 8 years, she had packed me a bag and told me she found my private Reddit account and started to accuse me of cheating on her. She was screaming and wouldn't let me talk to her or defend myself. She said she found the story I posted detailing that I have cheated with a coworker and now the coworker is pregnant. She was extremely angry, accusing me of writing it and putting her in this position while she was pregnant. She said she wanted a divorce and she won't let me see my unborn child. I have never cheated on her, never thought about it. I don't think I have ever given her a reason to think I did. I've never left her side. I always let her see my phone. I do everything to remain loyal. I found the post she thought was mine and it has some similar details to our life, but it was posted over a year ago. Similar details are how we met, ages, and the fact I have a coworker that is pregnant. Other than that, the post said that the op has an older daughter. The coworker has been working with the op for years. The coworker at my company started 4 months ago and was pregnant before she started. My wife is currently 6 months pregnant, with our first kid, a girl. We have had our ups and downs but nothing to cause this. How do I convince her it was not me when she doesn't want to talk to me or hear me out? I can't lose my wife or baby. My in-laws won't listen to me and my wife won't pick up or text back. This all happened about 3 hours ago. It started the minute I walked in. I don't know what she was looking up or doing. I do have a Reddit account but it is like a pet rock. I have it but it just sits there not really doing anything. I might look at it once or twice a year. Generally calm people. What made you lose your absolute crap that time? My son was maybe 8 months old and had recently diagnosed as profoundly deaf. Deaf kids will often inhale to make vibrations and noise that they can somewhat hear for stimulation. We were on pins and needles as I had just lost my job and our insurance and the cochlear implant surgery was going to cost us $170,000. We'd have to sell the house and one of the cars. We needed a break and our in-laws took us to the food court at a local mall. Our boy started to inhale and gasp. He needs a beating. An obese 20-something said no so quietly to her friends at the table next to us. I rarely curse in public and am generally non-confrontational, but a stream of insulting profanity issued from my mouth for a good 10 minutes that would have put a sailor to shame. I found it couldn't stop and it got on the verge of Bukowski and poetry. I insulted her, her mother, her weight, and her pinched-faced friends. I launched into the smell of her twat, how obese she was, how she'd only be able to reproduce with a blind intoxicated moron with a death wish as she was uglier than the devil's a-hole on fire with the crap of hell. And it only progressed from there. Female Lee Ermey's Marine drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket would have told me to tone it down a bit. I told her he was deaf and that we couldn't stop it and this was a goddamn food court in a pissant southern town filled with pissant inbred motherfing hellspawned redneck ignorant mutant troglodytes that embarrass normal troglodytes. The food court was silent and all the eyes were upon us. And then it progressed from there. She got up and left crying. I can honestly say the whole rant was involuntary, like a puss-filled boil popping and draining in a torrent. I had never done anything like this before and have not done it since. I feel bad for her to this day.
Am I the a-hole for losing it and telling in-laws to stop calling me mama and trying to erase my identity? I have 2 kids and I hate how everyone thinks of me as being just a mommy now. I don't get to be my own person. I'm just mommy. Husband doesn't face this. He gets gifts from everyone that have to do with his hobbies. Me? I get a bunch of mommy poop. Tee-hee, mommy needs wine. And I like matching outfits. I don't mean like one of those cutesy matching pajama sets that the nurses and horse girls wear in their staged Christmas Insta pics. I mean like, people actually think I'm going to go out in public wearing some cutesy matching outfits with my toddlers. As though I think they're mini versions of myself? Or dolls? From the time we got to the in-laws, it was mama this and mama that. At some point, my sister-in-law said it and I said, my name is Carmen, right? She just looked at me funny and said, of course, silly. I said, so why do you keep calling me mama? You aren't going around calling my husband papa? Sister-in-law just looked at me like I had two heads and was like, okay. This went on all over Christmas. Here you go, mama. Want another slice, mama? At that point I was just like, do you guys mind calling me by my name instead of calling me mama? The same sister-in-law as before did the whole golly gee doe-eyed thing and said, but you're such a good mama. I said that I'm not just a mom. I gestured to the things that my husband got for Christmas from them, and said, why didn't you guys get him anything that says papa? Everything you gave me is somehow related to me being a mom. Why does he get to be his own person? Mother-in-law grabbed my hand and squeezed it and said that she was sorry that she made me feel like this. She was just so excited about being a grandma and she never really thought of things like that. I was feeling a little better until both of my sister-in-law started going after me. One of them did that whole, are you okay? Do you need to talk to someone? You sound so angry, it isn't healthy. Faux concern that's meant to shame you for having any emotional response. The other one was angry and said that is being a mom somehow beneath you and do you think you're better than the rest of us? And all that. When we finally left, he asked me why I'd kept it in for so long, and I said that I haven't. No one listened to me before. I've said these things plenty of times. I've always asked them to call me by my name and not some disgusting nickname that boils me down to giving birth. He nodded, but said that I put a big pallor on the weekend and that I need to apologize for the outburst at some point. I said sure, as soon as Sills apologized to me for dehumanizing me for years.
My sister says my dog is too dangerous after he saved me from my stalker. This is kind of a complicated story, but I'll just get into it. I used to be in this controlling, kind of abusive relationship. When I finally broke it off a year ago, my ex started showing up places, trying to get me to take him back. Eventually, it developed into full-on stalking. He would show up at my work, and took to just waiting outside of it after he was banned, leave notes on my car when I was at the grocery store, leave all kinds of flowers outside my house and then stick angry notes on my door after he saw me throw them in the trash, wrote me all kinds of weird, obsessive emails and letters. I've had to change my phone number 3 times. The behavior escalated over time, and got scarier/more threatening. In one instance, he started a small fire in my driveway but the police couldn't get enough evidence connecting him to it. It was after that instance that I put cameras in my yard. I previously only had them pointing at my doors. I was horrified to learn that the police couldn't do anything about any of this until my stalker actually was caught doing something illegal, like breaking into my house. At which point, I might already be dead. I decided I wasn't spending the rest of my life waiting for the other shoe to drop, so I got a weapon and a concealed carry permit, took some self-defense courses, and started doing strength training. I also looked into getting an attack dog, but after all the money I'd sunk into my other methods of protection, they were prohibitively expensive. So I went to my local animal shelter and got the scariest, meanest looking dog I could find. This is where Thor comes in. He's a 100-pound American bulldog, looks like he'd rip your throat out on sight, but is basically a gigantic teddy bear. He loves every person he's ever met, is incredibly sweet and gentle with my 4-year-old niece, enjoys other animals, and even loves the mailman. I just kind of accepted that he probably wouldn't do anything to protect me from my stalker, but it didn't matter that much because having such a huge dog made me so much more confident. I brought Thor everywhere I could, and was working on getting him trained enough to be an emotional support animal, so I could bring him inside places with me. I absolutely would not do this until he was trained well enough to not disrupt a regular service dog. Last month, I woke up in the middle of the night to Thor whining. I was groggy and thought he had to go to the bathroom, so I got out of bed and opened the door. At that point, my house alarm went off and pretty soon after that, I was face to face with my stalker. I started screaming and went to run for my weapon. Before I could do anything though, Thor ran across the room in full attack mode. The memory is really blurry for me, but there was red liquid all over my living room and I remember my stalker was eventually able to escape, at which point Thor chased him outside and then came back to me. When the police showed up, they said Thor was a hero who'd probably saved my life. I don't want to list what they found in my stalker's car after they caught him, and I'm shaking a little as I type this, but I'm sure he was going to bring me somewhere and unalive me. It looks like he's going to prison for a long time though, so my nightmare is over. Pretty much everyone in my life thinks Thor is a hero, except my Sil. She and my brother have a 4-year-old, the one I mentioned above, and she says she doesn't want Thor around her, the child, anymore. She says since Thor has snapped in the past, he could do it again, so he's not safe to have around kids. We used to see each other a few times a week before she decided Thor was dangerous. The way she words this makes me really angry because Thor didn't snap. He saw a stranger break into his home, heard his owner scream in terror, and reacted to defend me, himself, and his house. Nothing about that screams dangerous around children to me, unless my niece is also going to break into my house and threaten me. This is also a very emotional issue for me because Thor isn't just a dog to me. He's my safe place, my hero, the one who protected me and kept me safe when no one else could. I've also gotten increasingly anxious since this happened, and I can't go anywhere without Thor. I barely leave my house, pay to pick up my groceries from the store instead of going in because I know Thor isn't allowed inside, and all my friends know that if Thor isn't welcome in their house, I'm not coming either, although they're perfectly welcome to come hang out at my house instead. I am really going through it, and am working with a therapist to overcome this. Luckily my office is still fully remote, but I need to be able to go back to work once we're in person again. But I really need my brother and Syl support. I think my Syl thinks I'm just pouting and that's why I won't just leave the dog home and come over without him. I don't know how to explain to them that the fear hasn't stopped just because my stalker is in jail. It's actually a lot worse than it was before. I've already suggested they come over and I crate Thor, but that wasn't good enough for her. What can I do to make her understand the situation better? My house gets trashed every day, and I couldn't be happier because of it. I hate cleaning the house like a lot of people. Sometimes I enjoy getting in the groove to some music, but mostly it's just tedious, and I don't get any help with it. When my, now wife, first moved in together, she was going through a bout of depression, and for a few years I would go to bed with her, wake up and go to work, and come back home most days her still sleeping, or if awake has yet to leave the bed, with her only really being up when I was home. So every day, the living room was the same way it was the moment I left, sometimes going weeks being untouched, and it started to make me feel lonely because it was like I lived by myself all over again. As if nothing happens when I wasn't looking. Growing up in a family of 6, with many pets, and a lot of stray acquaintances, there was never a dull moment in the house, for better or worse, which made it feel like it was home. After no small amount of therapy and constant love, care, and commitment, she's been slowly cracking through her depression with only occasional bad days. And we have recently had our lovely daughter join our life. We just moved to a new area and a new house. My wife plays with the kid in the living room, gets her changed in the child's bedroom, makes herself and the little one some food in the kitchen now that she's eating more solids, and our little one destroys whatever she can get her hands on. Coming home to see my daughter crawling over mommy as they watch PBS, my wife laughing and playing, my house in a lovely mess of activity and life, and I couldn't be any happier. Well, if I could get a hand with the dishes, that'd be nice, but with such a big victory, I'm not going to complain too much just yet. My wife and daughter's smile and laughter is all I need as payment for cleaning the house. My husband took me to a creepy party his friend hosted and now I feel uncomfortable around his friends. My husband has this group of friends who he is very close to. They all grew up together and still see each other regularly. They've always been nothing but nice to me for the entire 3 years I've known them, and before this had never made me feel uncomfortable in any way. On Saturday, it was his friend's birthday, so he invited us to his party. At the party there was a table full of gross things like you would see on a survival show, and these men were paying some girls to eat them, and they were filming it and laughing at them. There were a lot of nasty things, but things I noticed were live insects, eyeballs, bull's testicle smoothies and pig's uterus. I know there are probably places or cultures that eat this, and I'm not trying to insult anyone by saying it is gross, but the thing stunk really badly and I feel like they intentionally made the stuff look as disgusting as possible. I didn't eat any of it, so maybe it tasted better than it looked, but I doubt it based on the smell. My husband intentionally kept me away from that side of the party, but at one point I needed to use the restroom and I couldn't find him after, so I ended up there. When I was there, this random guy came up to me and tried to get me to eat one of the nasty things. He was pretty aggressive about it. One of my husband's friends saw me and he told the guy not her, and then he asked me where my husband was and made a joke about how he shouldn't have let me out of his sight. He then stuck to me like glue until we found my husband again, at which point he whispered something to him and then left. I feel so repulsed and creeped out by the whole thing. I literally had a nightmare about the party. It didn't help that I spoke to one of the girls and she said she had no idea this was going to happen before she got there. The dilemma I have is that we see them often. We're supposed to see them in 2 weeks, but I feel so uncomfortable just at the thought of having to be around them, especially the host. Honestly, I see them all differently now, and it's even made me see my husband slightly differently, even though he never participated. I feel like I'm doing a horrible job at explaining it, but the whole thing was extremely creepy to me. I don't know how to tell my husband this. Those friends are like family to him, and I feel like refusing to go will cause tension between us and make him feel like I'm forcing him to choose between me and his friends. Any advice on what to do?
My shameless sister said that I am jealous she's attending university and called me uneducated even though I am paying for her tuition, so I told her I won't be paying anything for her anymore. I have 3 siblings and they have lived with me for 5 years, and our mother is not mentally there. I didn't even know of my youngest sister's existence until she was 2, and a family member expressed concern for her. That is just to give you an idea of how unstable my mom is. My 19-year-old sister, let's call her Emmy, went to college in the fall. Financial aid had covered a really heavy fee, and it was left to me to cover about $6,000 after it, which didn't seem too bad considering how much uni is without it, and I also agreed to give her $50 a month to sustain herself. I agreed to pay that money for my sister because, at the time, I really didn't want her taking out any loans. I didn't get the opportunity to go to college. I have been working since I was pretty young, and I had my siblings, so there was no way I could juggle a job that would sustain us in college. Now my sister called me a few days ago and asked for $100 to go out with her friend. I said I don't have it. She got upset and said that the money I gave her was only enough for her sanitary supplies and she could barely eat out. She has a meal plan in a dorm. I told her for the 5th time to get a job. Guess what she told me after that? She told me I wanted to ruin her college experience because I am uneducated and didn't get the chance to go to college, so I am placing my anger on her because I am jealous of her. We even argued for a hot minute. She even asked me what I was spending my money on, and I asked her if she knew how much she knew it was to maintain our youngest sister. She said she was in school half the day. My younger sister is in daycare. Public school is free, daycare is not. I need to work, and in order for me to work, I have to pay an outrageous amount to leave her in a daycare. Now Emmy is somehow unaware of this and is acting like taking care of 3 of them is a financially easy task. Mind you, this is not the first time she is being selfish. I asked her to apply to be an RA so she could get free housing, but she didn't even attempt to apply. After arguing with her that what she said was selfish, I gave in and agreed with her. I told her I was so jealous that I was not going to pay for tuition ever again, and when she comes home, she can get a summer job to maintain herself or take out a loan. I don't know why I am working myself thin and exhausting myself for someone who doesn't even appreciate it. I told her I wasn't joking and was dead serious and hung up. She sent me some apologies after saying that she was just upset. Am I being an asshole and cutting her off, or is she just a teenager and am being childish? Women, how did you recover from the biggest mistake you've ever made at work? I once mistook my 20-year-old client for a grandma and she got so mad she threw her bowl of cucumber mask at me. For context, I've been an esthetician for 5 years at a high-end spa with rich clients, so I rarely treat people with scaly, pimply or dirty faces since they've already managed to get perfect skin. That's why I was shocked out of my mind that I had a client who had all that, and more. Her skin was dry like a lizard's, and she had every kind of wrinkle, like forehead lines, crow's feet, and lines that ran from her mouth to her chin. I was actually shocked people had skin this bad, but it got worse when she laid down on my facial bed because I saw her other imperfections up close. She had hair on her nose and cheeks, pores the size of golf balls, skin blemishes and acne, and her face was so red I thought she was blushing when she saw me. This felt like a tough one to fix up, so I got right to work. First I used a hydrating cleanser to cleanse the skin without stripping it of moisture. Then I used a mild chemical exfoliant to remove dead skin cells, followed by a facial steamer to open up her pores and soften her skin. I extracted her blackheads and my hand almost went limp from how many I had to extract. We were already halfway into our session and she hadn't said a word. I'm a blabbermouth and the silence was killing me, so while I was mixing her bowl of cucumber I told her I thought it was great that old women were taking care of their skin too, since most of our clientele are young women who are 20 to 40 years old. She sat upright on the bed and asked me how old I thought she was. I told her I thought she was a grandma, and that I didn't know retirement homes allowed visits to the spa. In an instant, she looked redder than when she first walked in, which I thought was impossible. She grabbed the bowl I was mixing and threw it at me. I looked down at my slimy covered clothes that looked like someone had jizzed all over me, and asked her why she would do that. I had half a mind to fire her as a client and ban her from the spa, but she slammed her ID in my face, and after some quick mental math I realized she was actually 22. She stood there with her hands crossed and eyebrows furrowed, but I felt like I was getting scolded by my grandma. She asked me why I thought she was in a retirement home, and I told her that she had more wrinkles than any 22-year-old I knew. She sat down on my facial bed and said I was right, and that I wasn't the first person to think she was so old. She said all her friends were embarrassed to have her around, so they just stopped inviting her to places, and whenever she talked to guys they said they weren't interested in cougars. She started using tons of makeup to cover her face up, but it ended up looking cakey from how much she had to put just to cover her pores. She choked back a sob and she nearly broke down on my facial bed. I couldn't just sit there and watch her cry, so I told her that I had something she could use, and showed her the sunscreen that our spa sells. I explained that we sell a growth factor sunscreen because it doesn't have any harmful chemicals, rubs out clear, and its gel-like texture feels great on the skin. The sunscreen protects the skin while rejuvenating it as well. My client asked me how that would help, and I told her that I treat high-end clientele who religiously buy the growth factor sunscreen every time they come in for a treatment. I never had to treat them for wrinkles, acne or other skin conditions like I had to do with her, or any of my other non-high-end clients, because the rich people's skin was always flawless. They just came in for a relaxing spa day. I explained that this was only the case with my rich clients, because they decide to spend a bit more on sunscreen than the average person, but it saves them thousands on other skincare products and extensive treatments from me. And I was sure that if she saw them, she would assume they had work done because they didn't have any wrinkles or hyperpigmentation and looked young, despite being older than my client. But the rich don't compromise their skin. Instead, they maintain their natural beauty by using things like the growth factor sunscreen. I made sure to tell my client that my rich clientele apply the sunscreen every day, not just on sunny days, because UV rays still penetrate windows and clouds, and it prevents their skin from being damaged and breaking out. That's why they invest in it, and they never have to worry about premature aging and breakouts or any other skin problems that normal people have. My client then asked how a sunscreen was able to keep rich people from aging, so I explained that the growth factor sunscreen had a clinically studied ingredient called kynotin. Kynotin prevents aging in the skin by protecting the DNA and skin cells from all sorts of damage. It directly reduces roughness on the skin, wrinkles and uneven pigmentation as well. Since my client had wrinkled skin, applying something with kynotin on her skin would improve the feeling of her skin, to make it soft and smooth. I recommended she use the sunscreen too if she wanted naturally perfect skin like my rich clients, but she almost freaked out when she saw the price. I explained to her that people spend thousands on clothes, makeup, and equipment to make their bodies look good. However, our skin is one of the only things you can never take off, so I told her she needed to invest in it, and the rich surely do, which is why their skin looks better than all poor people's skin. Besides, we really needed to get the fundamentals right. Otherwise, she'll have to live with damaged wrinkly skin for the rest of her life, and never have a chance at clear skin. To further ease her mind, I mentioned that the growth factor sunscreen doubles as a primer, so if I shaved her peach fuzz off she could implement it in her makeup routine and it wouldn't make her face cakey. That way, her makeup would look flawless and she would be protecting her skin barrier when she goes outside. After explaining it that way, she agreed to use the sunscreen daily, and I scheduled her for a follow-up appointment in 3 weeks after I finished her session. When she returned, I barely recognized her until she slammed her ID in my face again. Once she sat down on my facial bed, she let me know that she applied the sunscreen every day and she couldn't believe how much her complexion had changed. Her skin looked smoother and healthier, and she liked how pretty that made her look. Every time she applied it, she had a rejuvenating feeling that gave her more confidence to tackle her day. And honestly, it seemed like it calmed her stress, which meant she wasn't getting new wrinkles on her face. Her crow's feet were nearly gone and the lines that ran from her mouth to her chin, which weren't that apparent to begin with, were fully gone. She also got rid of all her other skincare products because the growth factor sunscreen was the only thing she actually needed to clear her skin. She talked about how applying sunscreen while indoors made a huge difference to her face because it always gave her a consistent natural look, and she could feel her skin barrier improving. With that, her skin blemishes disappeared and her cheeks weren't nearly as red as the first time I saw her. Now that her skin was improving, everyone around her noticed the difference. She told me that people were being nicer to her in public, so she was finally making friends again, and she was getting free treats from guys at stores and getting called pretty, along with them asking for her number. She said people usually kept their distance from her and she wasn't used to all the attention, but she really liked it. This made her stress levels drop dramatically. Surprisingly, she also mentioned that her mom had started using the growth factor sunscreen and her skin was hydrated so well she was looking younger by the day. I told her that the difference between people who use growth factor sunscreen versus normal sunscreen is that they will look younger, like they're in their 20s, while others will look more like grandmas, like she had first looked like when I saw her. She didn't appreciate that comment, but at least she'll stop being called a cougar now. Keep in mind, the only thing she was using on her skin was a growth factor sunscreen by Sunray and her skin was already starting to clear up. I knew now that her fundamentals were getting set. All that was left was treating her pores and other acne problems, and I was glad she was finally starting to be happy with her appearance. Since the first time I saw her I almost threw up too. I threw my plate of food in my ex's face and I regret nothing. What I did sounds bad, but after you hear the explanation, I'm sure you would have done the same thing too. I was so patient with my ex, but he just pushed me to the limit. I'm a 23-year-old girl, and I used to date a guy who was 28. We met on a dating app in 2020 but didn't meet in person until early 2021. We spent a lot of time together, like staying at each other's places 3 times a week for about a year. It felt like we were a couple, even though we never officially made it official. I started to feel frustrated because we weren't officially a couple, so I asked him if he had been with anyone else. We had agreed early on that we would tell each other if we were seeing other people out of respect. I didn't plan on seeing anyone else, but my question made it seem like I was okay with him seeing other people. He told me, "Yes, sorry I forgot to tell you 5 months ago. She wasn't sketchy though, so you're fine." I was really upset and went to the doctor, where I found out I had an STD, which he had given me. I decided to stop talking to him after that. We ended up meeting for dinner a couple of months later to talk about what happened. During our conversations, he asked me to be his girlfriend and promised not to be with anyone else. I foolishly agreed. But he kept making jokes about the infection situation, which really upset me, even though I tried to ignore it. One night, after attending a friend's wedding and getting pizza, he made another joke about my infection when he saw antibiotics on the table prescribed to his brother for the same thing. I had had enough of his disrespect and insensitivity, so I threw my pizza at his face, thinking it was a playful slap like he used to do with his food. It definitely wasn't the same, though. The pizza hit him in the eye and slowly slid down his face. It was kind of funny, to be honest. He was clearly mad and said, "I'm so mad right now," before going to bed. I couldn't help but hold back my laughter as I watched him wipe pizza sauce off his eyelid. The next day, I went home, and he broke up with me over text. This happened about a year ago, and every time I think about it, I can't help but laugh. It was the moment I finally stood up for myself, and that pizza incident was just too ridiculous. My mother-in-law spilled hot coffee on me for not wanting to name my baby after her dead husband. I am pregnant with my fiancé's first child. We've chosen to keep the gender a secret and just buy clothes we think are cute. It's been so much fun, but 3 days ago it kinda changed. I was with my mother-in-law and she was asking us about baby names. She suggested a few: Theodore, Jackson, Lars, and her persistent favorite Jerson. I was confused when I heard it, but apparently it was her late husband's name. He died when my fiancé was 5 of an overdose, so she suggested we call him that. I responded, "What if it's a girl? And no offense, but that name is really uncommon and very special." It kind of came out wrong, but she started getting snarky with me saying, "It's a boy." I can tell. She then rubbed my stomach, without consent, also with her knowing I'm sensitive to touch due to autism. I brushed her hand away and suggested, "How about Sean?" She showed the most disgusted face and said, "No. We need an American name. Not Irish. You're not Irish anymore, you're American." I looked at her dumbfounded. I was literally born and raised in Cork before moving at 19. She knows this. But I tried to suggest another to move on. "How about Asha?" She looked at me disgustedly. "My baby is a boy." "A boy," she yelled louder. I tried to calm her down. Okay, how about Leo?" That apparently was her breaking point. That's when it happened. She took the cup of coffee she had and threw it at me. It was hot. Hot, I tell you. I quickly got up and left immediately. I didn't want to stay there any longer. I just stopped by McDonald's to clean myself up. I drove home after that and told my husband. He was shocked and immediately went to tell his mother off. And of course, this is where the crocodile tears come. She threatened me. She said I'd never be able to meet my grandbaby if I didn't butt out and let her pick the name after I suggested your father's name, she cried. My husband is unsure of who to believe. He said that even if I was telling the truth, I shouldn't have riled her up, that her husband was the love of her life, and it would mean so much to her if we named our baby after him. He's sleeping on the couch from now on. Am I being too harsh?
Why do I believe my dad is a terrible person? My mom once shared a story with me about the time she was about to give birth to my brother. It was 5 a.m., and she needed to go to the emergency room urgently. She tried to wake up my dad, but he responded in a cranky and annoyed manner, saying he was sleepy and instructing her to call my uncle and grandpa instead. They ended up taking my mom to the ER, and this incident caused my grandpa to develop a strong dislike for my dad. It was disheartening for my grandpa because it was his first grandson, and my dad seemed to lack care and concern. Throughout my life, my dad never seemed to appreciate or understand me. He was solely focused on instant success and his own self-importance. I was constantly compared to my brother, with my dad saying things like, "Your brother is a good person, unlike you." This contrast was drawn because I enjoyed sports and preferred traveling. While my brother excelled academically and pursued a PhD, my dad saw no value in investing in my interests because I was a girl who would not carry on the family name. No matter how much I achieved, my dad never had anything positive to say. When I won an award, he would brush it off saying, "That's nothing." This behavior was typical of other Filipino immigrant parents in the US who worked hard, yet my dad seemed disinterested in pursuing any kind of personal growth or ambition. He became overly reliant on my mom, who became the primary breadwinner. He never understood basic life skills like how taxes work, and he expected my mom to handle everything for him, from filling out job applications to speaking with interviewers on his behalf. When it came to finding employment, he was unrealistic and impractical. Despite never offering any support or guidance, my dad always complained about my brother and me. He criticized us for not knowing how to cook, but he never took the time to teach us or make any effort to improve himself. As I grew up, I never saw him as a father figure, but rather as an adult child dependent on my mom. It was perplexing to me how my mom tolerated his inability to function independently. Even simple tasks like going to the bank to withdraw money required my mom to speak for him. When dining out, she had to place his orders for him. It seemed like he relied on my mom for everything. His lack of social manners and rudeness never failed to disappoint. I struggled to see any redeeming qualities in him, and he always believed he was right while his children were always wrong simply because he was the father. He hardly spoke to me at home unless I needed to address an issue or concern, and even then, he would often ignore what I was saying and focus on the sound of my voice. If I went into lengthy explanations, even without being disrespectful or rude, he would perceive it as such and respond with completely irrelevant statements. This often resulted in him suddenly pulling my hair or shoving me to the ground, inflicting physical pain and leaving bruises. I felt confused and humiliated because I hadn't said anything disrespectful, and I didn't understand why he would harm me physically. It was difficult for me to comprehend how someone could grow up to be so terrible and embarrassing. I tried to care for him because he is my biological father, and I had grown up with him. However, his physical appearance, which included being skinny and short with old acne scars he never bothered to address, added to my perception of him as unappealing both on the inside and outside. I couldn't fathom what my mom had seen in him either. As to me, he was an odd and embarrassing figure.
People who had traumatic childhoods, what's something you do as an adult that you hadn't realized was a direct result of the trauma? I always have to pat my back every couple minutes because of a fatal mistake I made when I was a child. As a kid, I grew up in Mombasa, which is the worst place you could be as a little girl. There are child lovers looking around for little girls like me, and there's a terrible trafficking problem. People who sell kids into child slavery. The safest place I could be in was at home, but even that was taken from me. At home, I only lived with my mom and new baby brother since my father disappeared from us one day. To make matters worse, my mother's HIV was taking a toll on her. There I was at 6 years old trying to take care of my baby brother and my mother who was dying. When she did pass away, it was all up to me to take care of my brother all by myself. We had no relatives and there was no one we could trust in Mombasa. Not any friends, and especially not the government. They allow child slavery right under their noses. Every day I strapped my baby brother to my back and looked for food for the both of us on the streets. Some restaurants were generous and would fix us a plate, but most of the time, what I found went to my baby brother. It was like this every day for a while until one day it absolutely poured. I must have walked with him on my back for 12 hours through the sudden cold and flooding. It was only until the rain came down and people went back outside that someone pointed out my brother. I unstrapped my brother, unfolded his blanket, and watched his body topple into my arms. He was cold and dead. God knows how long he was dead on my back, and I never noticed. I was so concerned on finding him food and his survival that I didn't check on him. I buried him alongside my mother and kept hoping for some sort of change in my life. An older gentleman with a camera approached me and introduced himself. He was an American who wanted to know me, because he had seen me walking around with my baby brother. When I told him my story, he took me back to his place. He provided me with food, clothing, and shelter and hired a caretaker to look after me while he worked. Eventually, a couple more kids my age came to live with me and we all bonded over our similar experiences. We became a family and for the first time we finally started school. This was a big deal for us because we were behind the other kids our age, but we looked after each other. I became number one in my class and kept my streak all the way to university. As I got older, I spoke to more news reporters and was invited to multiple events as the news reporter who saved me started a charity to help thousands of kids like me with his nonprofit organization Many Hopes. They save children just like me in over 6 different countries from extreme poverty, slavery, and trafficking every day. Many Hopes is the exact kind of organization I needed when I was 6 years old, on the streets with my baby brother on my back. It became my duty to become successful because I was the first lead example for the other children of Many Hopes to show what we can all achieve. I studied and graduated with a degree in human resources from one of the top universities in Nairobi with an education blessed and paid for by Many Hopes. Now, I'm an advocate for HIV treatment and protection of HIV-infected persons in the workplace, people who are just like my mom. I'm slowly building a world that my family and I could have lived in. I want all of you who are listening to help build that world too. You can help by just donating as little as $1 to Many Hopes right now on their website. Never again will we let a child like my late baby brother go hungry again. Why did my best friends F right next to me? Me and my friends Peach and Apple went to a big party in the city. It was generally a fun party. We had a blast. Obviously we were quite intoxicated except for Apple, but we were walking back to our hotel room after a successful night of getting poop-faced. One thing about my friends is that they tease me a lot. I have a boyfriend but we're long distance, as in different country long distance. They tease me a bit about that because he's so far away. All three of us are quite open with each other. We don't have a problem talking about our intimacy lives or anything, so we did a BDSM test a while back and one kink on my test was voyeurism. So they make jokes about that, for example asking if I want to watch them have intimacy, or saying they need to be sure I'm not peeping on them or anything along those lines. It does get a bit bothersome at one point but I don't mind too much. Now let's get back to the main story. So we got back to the hotel room after getting some takeout to soothe our hunger. They kept talking about how horny they were, but I just brushed it off as intoxicated talk because, to be fair, who isn't a bit horny after drinking a bit? We were intending on going to a nightclub downstairs in our hotel but then decided against it due to exhaustion hitting us hard. I was ready to sleep and I knew it wouldn't be easy because I tend to struggle falling asleep away from home, so I wanted to fall asleep as soon as I could. The hotel room was comfortably small, the beds were beside each other separated by a nightstand, so I got in bed and was trying to sleep. To be frank, I don't really remember what they kept talking about, but I do remember them slightly complaining that they couldn't F because I won't let them, but I again brushed it off as them joking around, so to continue the joke I laughed and said if I'm asleep in half an hour then sure. Big mistake. Anyway, I couldn't fall asleep because they kept calling me, so in order to be left alone I stopped responding. They called out to me one last time to tell me that it's my last chance to respond because they start banging. Like any sane person I assumed they were joking because no person would actually F when their close friend is in the same room on the bed next to them, right? I wouldn't be able to tell you how much time passed, but I started to hear them muttering about something, no clue what, but then the noises began. Now I'm a very socially awkward and non-confrontational person, and they know this, so there's no way in hell I could say anything now that they were quite literally effing in the bed next to me. I couldn't really sleep while that was going on. I was feeling so fucking uncomfortable. I felt sick, I didn't know what to do. What do you do in a situation like that? After the deed was done, it was 20 times harder to fall asleep after hearing something like that. Worse yet, in the morning they acted as if nothing happened during the day. They insisted they didn't since we were joking about it. I haven't confronted them about it, and they don't know I heard or was even awake, so now I don't know what to do. I went home after an exhausting journey and I feel so awkward and embarrassed talking to them because of that night. I can't even have some me time without that being burned in my memory. I learned that my treacherous maid of honor used my bachelorette party money to pay her debts. So I removed her from my wedding and filed a civil suit. My Mara, was in charge of planning my bachelorette party, which I wanted to be a surprise. We live in a city, but none of us live downtown, so I was hoping for a hotel room downtown and having a fun night out with friends, maybe a brunch. When Mara picked me up 2 weeks ago on Friday, I was excited to see where we were going and what we were doing. We ended up going to Mara's one-bedroom townhome and spent the whole weekend there. There are 8 of us, so it was cramped and we kept running into issues with only one bathroom. On Friday night we had games and ordered pizza. On Saturday we had a mimosa bar, went shopping, ordered food, and watched a movie, before parting ways on Sunday. It wasn't the bachelorette party of my dreams or a particularly fun weekend, but it was okay, and I appreciated it. But here is where the problems start. Last weekend, my fiancé, James, had just returned from a work trip. I hadn't caught him up to speed on the party, because there wasn't much to report. But when he returned, we were chatting and I told him about the party. He looked confused but said nothing else that evening. The next day, I got a message from Mara asking to meet up to talk about something. Mara revealed that James had given her $25,000 over a year ago, with the intention that it was used to pay for a bachelorette party. It would have been enough to pay for the entire bridal party to do a week-long vacation out of town, including airfare, hotel, food, drinks, and fun. I wasn't expecting this type of event, A weekend downtown would have been wonderful, and even though the party at her home wasn't what I hoped for, I was fine with it because I got to be with all of my friends. She, instead, used the money to pay off credit card debt and hoped that no one would notice. She didn't tell me out of guilt. After my fiancé found out what my bachelorette party was, he told her either she needed to sit down and tell me or he would. I told her I needed some time to process and went home. After talking with James about it, I decided that the best action would be to remove her from the wedding. I came to this decision because I don't feel I can trust her and don't want her to be standing next to me at my wedding. I slept on it overnight and sent her a text saying this on Monday. Since then, I have been getting texts from her mom and boyfriend telling me how awful I am for doing this since I didn't need a big party and Mara was able to financially benefit. Mara has called me crying because she already has her dress. James and I paid for all the dresses, and she can't wear it anywhere else. It's technically my fiancé's money even if it was for what was supposed to be a gift for me. He is leaving it up to me if I press charges, and has let me know he'll support whatever route I want to go. He does have text exchanges confirming that she received it and what it was for, and she has sent me things confirming that she used it to pay off debt, and her mom and boyfriend have as well. I removed my Mo from my wedding alone and disinvited those who continued to support her after I shared the amount she stole. My husband and I had a lovely wedding and honeymoon, and when we got back, we got in contact with his lawyer to begin compiling information and prepare to file a civil suit. This is still in the early stages, but we do have a responsibility to ensure she faces some kind of consequence to prevent this from happening to someone else. While we won't be pressing criminal charges, we'll cooperate with law enforcement should the DA wish to bring charges after information is brought forth in our civil suit. I honestly don't believe my ex-friend has money to repay us, but we will be donating anything we receive from the trial.
When did you realize your child was no longer a child? When my son was in the 8th grade, he got suspended and I had to leave work early to go get him. When I got there, I asked the principal what had happened. The principal explained that my son had beaten up 3 other boys and even broke one girl's wrist. I was obviously horrified and asked my son what the heck he was thinking. He simply told me that the boys had cornered one of his friends and were trying to make her undress for them. Being the chivalrous boy I raised him to be, he put a stop to it. I asked the principal if it was true and he dodged the question. In response to that, I told the school that if they're going to allow that type of harassment, I didn't want my child to attend and took him home. I told my son that I was going to take him out of public school. He replied by telling me that he didn't want to leave the school because if he wasn't there then who was going to stop it from happening again. This is when I realized my little boy had become a man. He would rather get in trouble to protect a friend than stay out of the spotlight and potentially face long-term consequences. I gave him a hammer to put in his bag and whip out next time the boys are doing that. Unfortunately, he was caught with it during a random bag inspection and was expelled from the school. The girl was eventually ravished by the same boys after school one day. My son ended up paralyzing one of them and caused severe brain damage to another. To make matters worse, the girl had Down syndrome. Should I pursue my attraction to my best friend's partner, even if it could ruin their relationship? I am currently having a moral dilemma that I can't seem to make a decision on and would really appreciate some input. This post is about me being conflicted on something that is seemingly no obvious right or wrong answer. Here is the situation. Me and my best friend met, B, in high school at age 16. We clicked instantly and have been best friends ever since. B, partners with H, it's a happy relationship, they have 2 BF and BFHD. B and H, moved away because of work 2015 let's say. I live like a 2-hour drive away and we obviously see each other rarely, we text daily. At times I do miss them, but obviously it's not as often since I lost contact with a lot of people as I didn't want to end up in real-time ships, so I am single and living my life as I please. My relationship with B and H is great, I keep them up to date of my life, never share anything that could be seen as inappropriate, or anything that would make anyone worry about my decisions or lifestyle I live. Here's where it gets complicated and confusing. B and H had a an open relationship that was open really only to say a safe word if certain things were being done and they weren't. Meaning only certain things could be done when they weren't playing. By that I mean anything outside of intercourse, kissing, touching, etc. The reason for the open relationship is that they both weren't quite sure they wanted kids and they wanted to take their time and decide. I know both of their fetishes, and I knew of the details of the open relationship, but I never asked and they never told me anything. So for that reason, I wouldn't want to check up on anything, or pry. So when I knew that this was happening or occurring and I thought it wouldn't hurt to ask myself how I would react to this. And the answer was simple. I liked the idea of the thought that maybe at least neither of them had a real tie-in-ship with anyone and were entirely devoted to each other. Even though none of it went beyond what I knew about the situation. I never, not for a second, found either attractive or attractive in a way that would make me want to be involved with either of them. It's a pretty good deal I think. The only thing that deteriorates that is that I really like D and am drawn to D, H, I haven't exactly attempted anything with him, but my mind often goes to imagining both him and myself doing certain things. But I have yet to put any effort into actually voicing something or suggesting anything. I never have done that. The way it all started was pretty early on in conversation. I brought up a certain thing that involves his body part that I would 100% not mind seeing, although I am not going to describe that thing to you, but at the exact time he had a thing that I would also like to see, not of his body part mind you. Without going into further detail, that one thing for me would completely throw off the idea of not being into H because his enthusiasm with that one thing would most likely make the picture in my head much better and he would look even better with the better picture. but obviously I wouldn't want anything to ruin his relationship, so that stops me from acting or even suggesting anything. So far I have went and still go, on a journey of trying to just suppress it and forget about it, but it is often brought up because I have had random situations that certain ones happen that make me think of it again.
I am in no way attracted to H. I couldn't even tell you that I find him physically attractive. It's just a specific thing that I find a certain mood or emotion he presents that looks like something I would want to see.
I won't go into any details of it, but it makes me very conflicted on if I should even try to encourage anything or just leave it be. I would even willing to walk away from talking about it any time he would like it too. I just find the idea of it interesting. I often shut down the conversation when I start getting into detail of the one thing, but that could just be me turning the idea off in my mind. I asked a couple of people previously, including my closer female friends, who all said really just leave it be, it's not worth ruining the relationship. But in my eyes, I could care less about the relationship being ruined, it's just not my problem, but I kept it in my head that it wouldn't be right to ruin his relationship even if that was never something would come out of it anyway. Does that mean I should just not say anything regardless of what I do or do not want to because I know his feelings are more important than my simple curiosity? If I know that I am unable to control what I say and think, then I shouldn't find myself in a position where I can make a decision one way or another on it. But if I could easily control what I say and think, then I should be able to say what I want regardless of others' feelings as long as that doesn't harm anyone. I, for example, wouldn't want to leave someone else, who I had no feelings for, by themselves for a long period of time or not see them or talk to them at all, even if I wanted to say something that I know could harm their relationship, to just give myself a chance to visualize the thing in my head. I would rather just not talk to that person than make them start forgetting me. Similarly, I would, if I hated the idea, stop talking to someone who kept always talking about doing certain things that have certain chances of happening but have a chance of being ruined by the law and possibly going to jail. Like I said, I would stop talking to them, but that's probably just me also stopping my mind from thinking about it. If I knew I wasn't going to say anything that could harm anything, I think it's okay for me to want to talk about anything I want to. I don't believe there should be any laws that stop what I want to say if saying it won't harm anything. That's just my 2 cents on it if you were curious of Kindoff where I stood on it. Which is why it confuses me even more when I hear just leave it be, because I don't believe I can leave it be, in a way. I don't care if they get caught where the police and everyone knows the details. I'm talking purely of me saying something that affects only me and him.
Was there anyone who tried to warn us about something that happened but we didn't listen? Who? Ignaz Semmelweis, often described as the father of hand washing. In the 1800s he discovered that maternal mortality could be drastically reduced by doctors washing their hands between patients. He was largely ignored and his book got absolutely slated. This is supposed to have contributed to him having a mental breakdown and he died in a psychiatric hospital. Roger Boisceli, an engineer involved with the Space Shuttle program, who warned his superiors for months prior to the Challenger disaster that launching in cold weather could cause the O-rings to fail. Care to guess what caused the Challenger disaster?
As a doctor/surgeon, have you ever performed surgery and discovered cancer accidentally? Girls, listen up. I was 35 and after a very rough high-risk pregnancy, I had a miscarriage and an ectopic pregnancy prior, and nightmare delivery. I decided when my daughter was 7 months. I didn't want to go through another pregnancy and one of my tubes tied. My husband agreed. After a lot of discussion, we convinced my doctor that it was the best solution as opposed to my husband getting a vasectomy, as I was terrified of getting pregnant. The tube ligation went well, probably up to that point one of the easiest surgeries I'd experienced. I was instructed to call 3 days after to let them know how I was. Instead of talking to the nurse, I was transferred to the surgeon. He told me he had seen a very tiny spot on my cervix and sent it in for a biopsy, thinking nothing of it. It came back as an extremely rare and aggressive form of adenocarcinoma of the cervix and that I needed another biopsy to see how far it had gone. To say I was stunned is an understatement. I fell completely apart. 2 days later I had the cone, a section around the original area, biopsy. The results were the cancer had spread, but they didn't know how far. I needed what was called a radical hysterectomy, a normal hysterectomy but also removal of abdominal lymph nodes. My surgeon said he didn't feel comfortable doing the surgery as it was very invasive. He wanted to send me to Portland, or to a specialist there. Off to Portland I went. After an 8-hour surgery and a bout of hallucinating due to the morphine they gave me, on the 3rd day, I was told that they had gotten all the cancer and as soon as I was well enough I could go home. Normally, I would have been there for 2 weeks, starting chemo and radiation therapy. I didn't have to have either. I was home in 5 days. I went back to work part-time in 4 weeks. Both doctors said I was extremely lucky as the cancer I had is usually a death sentence as it has no symptoms, and if I hadn't had my tubes tied and the doctor missed the spot, I most likely would have died. My psycho roommate wrecked my room because I'm hotter than her. I have been living with Lily for a year. She is usually calm, but she has been picking huge fights for nothing recently. For example, one day I was going to go hang out with my friends around 1 p.m. Lily was in the shower at the time, so I knocked on the bathroom door and told her I was heading out, to which she replied okay, and I left. When I got home she came down the stairs as soon as I was in the door and started shouting at me for not locking the door, saying anyone could have come in. She had already been in the shower for about 15 minutes when I left, so I figured she would only have been a couple more minutes, and it never even occurred to me that someone would lock the door while in the shower anyway. I told her that since we rarely get visitors that it was unlikely someone would have entered the house without permission in the few minutes she was in the bathroom. She said I clearly didn't respect her privacy and stormed off into her room and gave me the silent treatment for days. After that incident, I've heard her talking to people about possibly getting me kicked out and also talking to what I presume is her boyfriend, I heard his name, about coming over and moving my stuff. My friends and I picked apart the contracts we had and found that I was completely safe from being kicked out and that my housemate may have actually violated some terms. Her boyfriend did show up and they kept putting paint and boxes in my room but wouldn't speak to us, and she just yelled insults as she had done when I tried to apologize. A few days later, I came home from work and immediately checked my room as I'd been anxious about leaving it all day unsupervised. I don't have a lock. When I got there, my things were broken, covered in paint, ripped up, etc. I took pictures and sent them straight to our landlord and emailed them to myself and friends so I had copies. My friends were there with me so I felt comfortable. Going to my housemate's room and opening her door to ask her about it, I was mad but I didn't step inside her room. She wasn't there but the boyfriend was. He was crying and told me he was so sorry and he didn't realize what he was enabling her to do when he brought her the stuff. I asked him if he could maybe calmly explain it all to me and if he would be okay with me and my friend recording the conversation. He said yes. Apparently this was planned, although not exactly how it turned out. But first, the context for why is needed. She wanted the boyfriend to move in, but at first was just gonna ask if I was cool with it and that would be it. He moved in and we have a new roomie, until about a week ago. She had friends over one night, I was home but upstairs in my room, and they were getting drunk and playing truth or dare. Lily somehow got to ask one of the other girls, who was interested in women, if she thought her or me was hotter, and the friend said me. From that point Lily was scared to have her boyfriend move in with me still in the house in case he changed his mind about which one of us he liked. So she waited till she saw me getting ready to leave and hopped in the shower. She had assumed that I would have locked the door and would have been able to get mad at me about it again, assuming I would argue for the door being locked. When this didn't happen, she switched up her plan. She asked him to bring over paint, gloss so it won't come out of anything easy, but didn't tell him what it was for. He has texts between them that showed she never told him why. She was also letting me overhear the conversation yesterday to try and scare me out. She was going to use the paint to wreck my room as she had done then, say I did it to try and make me seem crazy and unsafe to live with. That's why the paint and boxes kept entering my room, as she was hoping to be able to record me moving them out. Her boyfriend left in the morning as well to go to work but called in on his lunch break to catch her wrecking the room. They had a big fight and apparently have broken up. He was very confused, so he tried to get in contact with her friends and one or two of them spilled all of this to him. He showed me texts to prove that he had gotten these answers from people. Apparently she has a past of doing things like this and is meant to be on medication, but I don't know if any of that is true, as we can only know from what the friends told us. They also said she might like unlocked doors because she has once in the past robbed her own stuff and claims someone broke in before confessing. She is currently hiding out at her brother's place. The boyfriend only knows this because after asking around to check if she is okay, her brother's wife told him she was with them. We asked the brother's wife if she knew anything about Lily's past, but she said other than the occasional episode she has been told if she doesn't know, and will ask the brother when she is home. Knowing that this could be some kind of disorder, I didn't want to put too much pressure on Lily, so I texted her, "Hey Lily, I have seen what you have done to my room. I'm not going to get the police involved yet, but can we talk and work something out? Maybe you can help me with replacing the stuff that is broken. Also, I've done some research and you are right. I should lock the door when we can't be aware of it, and I think we need to discuss a new locking routine." She responded by calling me various insults like freak, whore and the F slur. I'm straight, but a lot of people mistake me as being lesbian as I'm a tomboy with only guy friends. She says I'm trying to steal her boyfriend to add to my collection. She is also blowing up at the boyfriend for betraying her and using her to get to me. The boyfriend has told me and her that he has zero interest in me and that until this afternoon he thought she was perfect and that he loves her. She's not calming down, or even willing to talk without insults. I'm thinking of going to the police tomorrow, but she is currently saying that she will tell everyone that the boyfriend SA at her. I told her if that was true I would 100% take her seriously, but I needed her to say it to me calmly so I know I fully understand what she is saying. She said it doesn't matter if it's true cause she knows he would have it meant he could get to me. At this point the boyfriend started crying again and said that he would never do anything to hurt her and that the two of them hadn't even slept together yet. So I don't want to escalate things any further in case she starts making serious accusations against anyone. Usually I would believe her straight away, but her recent actions, her phrasing of it doesn't matter if it's true, and just how heated she is, I don't want to jump to conclusions. I also think it's suspicious that she said she'd only do it if we talked to the police. And who knows, she could start accusing me and my friends of things too. The friends that ratted her out also warned that me and the boyfriend should go places she can't find us, as she has in the past assaulted them and tried to hit an ex with her car. The boyfriend is going to hang out with his mates, and while I won't be hiding anywhere, multiple friends will be staying with me over the next few nights as we try and work all this out. My white kids are ashamed of my black wife. When I was 14 I went to my first party and I ended up losing my V card. I later found out that she was pregnant. She wanted to end its life, but my parents were against that and ended up convincing her to keep the pregnancy. We would pay her for it and she could sign away her parental rights. She gave birth to twins. We were pretty well off, so I had a nanny and it never slowed down my education. In college I met my now wife Haley. I told her I had kids and she was fine with it. Later in our relationship she met the boys and they fell in love with each other. We eventually got married and she moved in. The boys loved and cared for her. They would nap with her and on her periods, during her bad cramps, they would take turns feeding her while one laid on her stomach for warmth and pressure. They would give her lots of kisses and hugs, and truly I was so happy to see my three favorite people get along. I'm a pale man with white hair and my boys favored that while my wife is black. Once, my wife dropped off the boys and kissed them, and their classmates picked on them for having a black mom, and to retaliate they said she was their nanny. We talked about it and my wife chose to never accompany them to school again. My wife has this trip that she has always wanted to go on with her kids. She was even more excited to take the boys and she made matching clothes for them and the boys helped her. We booked it in advance of our anniversary. Our 7-year wedding anniversary came around and I posted pictures online. It was great until one of my kids' classmates found it and spread it around the school. My boys started getting picked on for having a black mom and especially one so dark. They were lashing out at my wife and saying very racist and disrespectful things to her. 2 months later I got a call from a woman, Becca, who claimed to be the mother of my children and surely enough it was true. She came back saying she wanted to check up on the boys and see how they were doing. I spoke with my wife about this and she figured it would be good for the boys to meet their biological mom. They met and a month later my wife's trip was approaching. The boys suggested that Becca come along but there were only 4 tickets and this trip had been planned out and booked months ago. It would be difficult to accommodate a 5th person since for most of the events, tickets were sold out. My older son suggested Becca come instead of my wife since it's a family trip. My wife started to beg and plead with them that they had been planning this trip for a long time and it was their trip. I told the boys that Becca would not be going on this trip. Shortly after this incident I went on a business trip for 2 days. There was a party the boys asked to go to that I specifically said no to and instructed my wife to not let them go either. The boys tried to go when my wife reminded them of what I said, and they told her she wasn't their mother and to stop acting like it. The boys blamed her for their biological mom not being able to go on the trip and long story short one of my boys slapped her. I came home Saturday morning as I always do because everyone is home and they all wake up early to come greet me and my wife would usually be making something delicious with loud music playing and my boys would be arguing over something and they would always run to hug me. This time when I came home, the house was quiet and no one was downstairs. I went to check on the boys and they were in a bad mood and I went to find my wife and she was in bed just laying there. I later found out what happened and scolded the boys and canceled the trip. They begged and pleaded with me and apologized to my wife. I don't know what to do about the trip. My white kids are ashamed of my black wife. After canceling the trip, my wife insisted that there was no need. She said since I spent so much money on it would be dumb not to go. I suggested she goes with Becca and the boys since the trip was her idea. She pointed out some safety concerns since we don't know Becca and we agreed it would be better if I go. While on the trip I called her a lot but she never answered. I would only get the odd text off of her. I presume she was just busy with work. A week later we got back and noticed the plants were dry even though my wife prides herself on her garden. The inside looked exactly as it was when we left. I checked our house alarm system and noticed the door hadn't been opened since we left. I found my wife laying in her sewing room, highly intoxicated and I noticed all of the clothes she made for the trip had been cut apart. She continued not to speak or move for the next 2 days refusing to eat. After some time she started to eat and even hugged me back. When she finally spoke again I apologized for everything that had happened. She accepted my apology and forgave the boys. I noticed that she didn't really speak to the boys like she used to. She hasn't hugged them, kissed them, or made any cute comments about how much she loved them. She didn't even set up our family game night. I confronted her and she told me she wasn't their mother, and her job was to make sure they were taken care of and that she wasn't hurting them in any way. Our relationship is back to normal and she's affectionate towards me but she's not like that with the kids. I miss our old family. What was the most gruesome thing you saw at your school? At my high school there were 2 kids, twins, who had I believe cerebral palsy. They were the sweetest kids, super bubbly, always had a kind word to say to everyone, always smiling, whip smart, the kind of students who couldn't go for a class change without having a friendly conversation with someone in the hallway. I remember they were both really into bugs and their final projects in science classes would always involve entomology in some way. Just utter delights. Some dirtbag in our freshman year decided that it would be funny to make a fake Facebook page for one of the kids and make a bunch of vile posts about them being really weird intimate deviants, posting long lists about their fantasies and experiences, that they would pay people to sleep with them in the bathrooms between classes. Sociopathic stuff. For some reason this dirtbag thought it would be a smart move to brag about making this to a couple of his friends, who were also dirtbags but had enough moral sense to realize that this was a special kind of messed up. A kid who was always a bit on the tough side got in fights, had a bit of a loud mouth, but was ultimately a good person confronted the main dirtbag during class change one day. He had taken a glue stick from his locker, and in the middle of telling him off, he jammed it underneath this kid's jaw as hard as he could. Shattered it, knocked a couple of teeth out, blood and mouth tissue splattered against the floor and the lockers. His screams could be heard through the entire wing. I didn't see the dirtbag in school after that, but the kid who hit him came back after a 2-week suspension and was a hero until graduation. Dirtbag actually turned out alright, believe it or not. Got sent to some crazy harsh military school that straightened him out. Last I heard he was a scuba instructor in Bermuda.
My gold digger stepmother-in-law refused to let my father-in-law attend my wedding. When he did come, she showed up in a white wedding dress and tried to ruin my special day. My husband never got along with his stepmother because she was originally a caretaker they had hired for my husband's grandfather before he passed. When she realized my father-in-law had money, she clung to him like a small child to a new toy. It was very obvious to everyone except my father-in-law that she was using him for money. She had my father-in-law cash in his retirement to buy not only her a new car, but both her kids' cars and her grandchildren new ATVs. Just to name a few of the endless amount of crap he's bought her. My husband wasn't even told about his stepmother and dad marrying because his dad knew he wouldn't approve. Mind you, my father-in-law is her 5th husband. Over the last 5 years she's milked my father-in-law dry. He won't be able to retire now because she cost way too much money and he spent the $2 million he had in retirement paying for her lifestyle. My father-in-law is such a nice guy. He's worked hard his whole life and deserves to retire. So needless to say, we're not fans of his wife. My husband even refuses to call her stepmother and instead refers to her as that bitch my dad is married to. On top of being entitled, she's also a total Karen that demands to have everything her way, and if she doesn't, she throws fits. She also thinks she's better than everyone else and doesn't even try to hide her snootiness. So, after 4 years of being together, my husband and I decided to get married. We wanted to incorporate all the parents in our wedding. So to start the wedding out, my husband walked my mother down the aisle. Originally, my amazing mother-in-law was supposed to walk down with my father-in-law because my husband didn't want his stepmother to be celebrated like our other parents. But when his stepmother heard of this, she threw such a huge fit. She claimed we were out to get her and that my husband was trying to get his parents back together. Nothing we said calmed her down. Then, the day before our wedding, my father-in-law called us and said they wouldn't be coming to our wedding. He said his wife couldn't stop feeling targeted by us, so she didn't feel comfortable coming to our wedding. My husband said that this was going to be such a huge milestone for him and he needs his dad there. He said he would never forgive him if he didn't show up. His dad agreed to come and he wouldn't bring his wife. My first thought was, great, I really didn't want her there anyways. I just included her to keep peace. During the rehearsal, only my father-in-law showed up, but by that evening, his wife arrived as well. I assumed she found out that my father-in-law was actually walking down the aisle with his ex-wife. But, not only did she show up to the wedding, she showed up in a white dress. Not just any white dress, but a long white lace dress. It was the effing dress she wore to her wedding. I was livid. Everyone knows only the bride wears white, and even if you don't know the rule, logic says don't wear your effing wedding dress to someone's wedding. This was the final straw for me. She had always been rude to me and my husband and treated us like poop since the day we met her. She had tried to keep my father-in-law from coming to his only son's wedding, and now she was wearing a wedding gown to my wedding. I saw red. I told my brother to escort her to her seat and that she would not be part of my wedding. I told the photographer she was not to put my father-in-law's wife in any pictures. I basically left her out of everything family-oriented. We took photos before the wedding because it was supposed to start raining and it was getting dark. She tried to get in on a photo of us with my husband's parents, but I quickly had her removed. She cried and said, "I welcomed you into our family like a daughter and this is how I'm treated?" I went off. I told her, "First off, I've been in this family longer than you. We're getting married after being together for 4 years. You married my father-in-law last year after only knowing him for 3 months. You try to keep father-in-law from coming to any events, including his only child's wedding, and you're wearing your wedding dress to my wedding. How big of a hole do you have to be to wear your wedding dress to someone else's wedding? Go sit the F down and shut your snooty butt up." I rarely curse and I'm not one to yell, so everyone knew I meant business. The entitled stepmother tried to speak, but my mother and mother-in-law wouldn't let her. They both went into mama bear mode and stepped in. My mother-in-law really does love me like a daughter. The entitled stepmother was escorted back to her seat and luckily, everyone there was on my side. My father-in-law walked mother-in-law down the aisle and the entitled stepmother was left out of everything. Even my father-in-law told her she had gone too far with the dress. It was apparently a big fight with them after the wedding was over. A month later, we got the photos back and I made sure that all the photos of mother-in-law and father-in-law together were printed out and sent to my father-in-law and entitled stepmother, just to piss her off. We've now made it very clear that my father-in-law is invited to every event, but that beach my father-in-law is married to is no longer welcomed. I'm done with trying to keep the peace.